All right, let's go ahead and, we're all ready. I'd like to call this meeting in order. It's at 12:32 PM on Tuesday, May 28th. Roll call, please.
Chair, Councilmember Johnson,
Here.
Vice Chair Sanchez Palacios is absent. Chair Halter,
Yes, here.
we do have a quorum.
Is there any public comments today? On anything that's on
We've never seen any public.
And if it's okay with my colleague, we're discussing perhaps reordering this since we have staff here to
Sure, yeah,
maybe start with number 3. We'll work backwards. How's that?
that's fine.
Number 1 and 2 is 2 and 1 is 3.
Okay.
Okay. So starting with item number 3, that would be the Water Commission, and basically identifying the difference between professional and a non-professional positions.
Mhm.
And I'm not quite sure if the water department has anything that you'd like to say about the classification, why that's so, and why that's really important.
So as far as the classifications, and they were set in 2014, I think for the needs that were seen then when the Water Commission was first formed. And I think what staff kind of sees in the code description for the differentiation between professional and non-professional.
Yeah.
I think what we see is potentially that the language for the professional category may not be broad enough to capture all water professionals. It specifically doesn't reference wastewater professionals,
Oh.
people with wastewater experience. It also is very focused, I think, maybe on water conservation, water efficiency, because that's what was really the focus at the time, new water supplies and water efficiency. And perhaps now with broader issues to tackle in the water department, that maybe more broad language would help
Mhm.
with that issue of seeing that there are some people with professional experience in the non-professional category. That might be because they didn't really fit the specific language that was in the ordinance on professional.
I would say that was true of Emily Armbruster, but not true of Nova Clyde. Nova Clyde certainly was a professional.
Yes, was she not a professional?
She was in a non-professional.
Oh, she was. I thought she moved into the professional category.
No, she was.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh, no, she was, well, she's listed on this, let's see, for her 2022 to 24
She
appointment,
moved to
listed
professional,
as professional.
but she was put on as a non-professional.
Okay.
Non-professional spot. So that was in what year? In 20, when she moved to professional?
This has her appointment as 2022 to 2024.
Which is when Emily Armbruster came in.
The afternoon.
Yeah, come on in, George.
Have your fun, yes.
I know. I followed Mr. Reiser.
I haven't been.
Sorry to interrupt.
Um,
We were talking,
We're working backwards on the agenda.
backwards, so we're working on number
Number 3
3,
first.
Okay,
the water thing.
Yeah.
familiar with that one.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what we were just talking about was staff's suggestion that we broaden is it okay if I catch
Yeah,
up?
absolutely, please.
Broaden the requirements for the water professional to capture more people. So for example, Emily Armbruster. But also she was pointing out, and I thought this was fascinating, that it doesn't talk about wastewater professionals.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah. I actually like that recommendation too.
Yeah.
To add them as, and there may be other positions like that may be missed in that category. I guess the question I have though is regards to non-professionals. So if anybody has those qualifications, then they'd be excluded from being a non-professional,
a professional.
right? I mean,
Oh, yeah, from a non-professional.
from non-professional, because I know the intent is to get as broad a range of input in the community. So the 3 non-professional positions even if those people have been retired for 20 years, would not count as a non-professional, right?
Correct.
And that was by design for that reason I just stated.
I can't say.
Okay, it makes sense.
I will say, I have spoken to three former council members about this.
Yeah.
And the Water Commission was the successor to the Water Shortage Rate Task Force,
Oh, okay.
which very intentionally had non-professionals on it because it was very much about water rates. And the Water Commission still is really the body that deals with the water rates.
Got it.
So,
So, because I could see a resident, a ratepayer, having to be a non-professional.
mhm.
And that was my only question, was that whether we would exclude somebody who knew too much about water. And I guess if they know too much, the knowledge is one thing, but if they ever held any of those positions, then that would be considered a professional and would not fit the other category. Okay. I go back to. Any other comments or questions?
Public comments?
Public comments? Oh, please.
Thank you. So unscripted, but I was on the Water Commission and I had resigned and I sent a very detailed letter of resignation. And my personal opinion as a resident and also as a ratepayer is the ratepayers are underrepresented on the Water Commission. And specifically the scoping of the professional category. I don't think there's much of an issue with recruiting for the professional category because the way I read the Muni Code
Mhm.
is they don't have to live in the district.
Right.
Okay, so there's a broad spectrum of people who may want to apply for that if it's properly advertised. But there are a lot of restrictions and limitations on the non-professional category. And recently it was my observation that there was a professional person occupying the seat of the non-professional seat. I don't know how that slipped through. And in addition, that person doesn't even live in the district. Even though
They're not a ratepayer.
their application said with a 93001 zip code, it was disclosed to me by her that she actually lived in La Conchita.
If I could interrupt, Emily Armbruster is no longer on the Water Commission, is that correct?
Correct. So that's a recent occurrence.
Yes.
Okay, for whatever reasons, I don't know. But now there are 2 seats open in the non-professional category.
Okay.
Okay, one of the reasons why I resigned was the way that commission was stacked. I had no voice as a ratepayer on that commission in a non-professional scenario because there were 5 people that were professionals. And so as the 6th with a vacant seat, my voice was marginalized as a ratepayer in the non-professional category. The people occupying the professional seat, they have a viewpoint.
Mhm.
Typically that viewpoint I have found aligns a lot with industry standards, practices, and regulation from the state. And then also what they have been working towards for their entire career. But the intent of the committee was not to have a bunch of people like-minded simply agreeing with staff and the philosophies, but in addition, representing the ratepayers. And I believe that was the original intent of this body. And I don't believe that the recommendations committee had the opportunity with the candidates that were presented to them to weigh in on the representation of the ratepayers because of the nature of the way that the candidates were presented to council. So I could carry on about this, but there was, in my opinion, not only a significant gap,
Mhm.
but in some ways, I think it was a disservice to council. I think it was a disservice to the people that council represents to allow staff to manipulate the candidacies and the body to be in alignment with staff's wishes. So that's a nutshell of my comments.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for being here. Appreciate that.
Chair
Yeah.
Walter, may I
Yeah.
add a little context, if
Please.
I may?
Yeah.
So I just want to provide a little clarification in regards to the commissioner mentioned, but at the time of the application, for example, that commissioner did not hold a professional job. And so the non-professional category indicates a demonstrated interest in. So as you noted, someone who has a demonstrated interest in, for example, and hold or held prior positions, for example, currently did not hold a position that would make them eligible for the professional category when they were appointed. So that is how someone, for example, and similar to another commissioner, as was noted earlier, there's an opportunity for them to apply for a non-professional or professional position should that change. And so, for example, in this instance, they obtained a job after being appointed, which then qualified them for the professional category. The municipal code right now does not provide us with an opportunity to adjust someone's term based on whether or not they were appointed in the professional or non-professional category. So the question did come up for staff when this person accepted a position, for example, if we had the ability to change their designation. And unfortunately, based off of our reading of the municipal code in consultation with the city attorney's office, we determined that there wasn't a path forward to change the designation from professional to non-professional.
Mhm.
So that is how a situation arose where someone was essentially a professional in a non-professional category because they didn't hold that position when they applied. I'd also just like to point out, city clerk's office is the office that intakes all applications.
Mm.
And so we intake all applications and present all applications to the ARC committee. So there is no, for example, when the applications come in, we have qualifications, right? And so the city clerk's office does a first pass on qualifications as it is outlined in the municipal code. And then those applications then get presented to the ARC committee, for example, if they've met those eligibility requirements.
Got it.
The one gap in the code that I'll just highlight as well is as it relates to verification, for example, of address, of job.
Yeah.
The applicants sign under penalty of perjury when they submit an application. So the verification process to meet these eligibility requirements, for example, the code is silent in many areas in regards to how we do verification. So when a candidate signs under penalty of perjury, for example, we do not confirm their address.
Got it.
They're signed an application under penalty of perjury. We also go through a process by the information that is provided on their application to determine whether or not they are eligible or not eligible. What I will say is in other committees, in addition to the Water Commission, we have found ourselves with questions around whether or not there's qualifications.
Mhm.
For example, recently on a property owner versus business owner, is an Airbnb considered a commercial property? The things like that. The code doesn't provide us a process by which we verify what the eligibility requirements are. So I just want to be very clear that when there are questions of eligibility, we present those to the ARC committee and we would present those questions of eligibility
Got
to
it.
the ARC committee for the ARC committee to make a determination on whether or not the candidate is eligible or not, unless of course their application at face value does not include the required information of eligibility.
Got it.
So I just want to be very clear that we base whether or not someone is eligible or not off of the information that they have provided on an application.
Got it.
And we don't necessarily have a back and forth with the candidate, for example, on whether or not to confirm their address or to confirm if they're professional or not. We base it off of the application at hand. So I want to be very clear that applications that are received in turn are provided to the ARC committee as they are
Got it.
received.
Okay, thank you.
So if you don't mind if I add to that a
Please.
little bit. If we, in regards to the delineation between professional and non-professional, that sort of determination is based on what application they provide. But then if there's a question mark from our end on it, we usually hand it over to the water department for clarification on what they.
Consider this part.
Yeah.
That applicant. This is I'm trying to hold to protocol and to do this, though it's very tempting to just try to have a casual conversation about this. But I have several questions. I'm not sure, Councilmember Johnson, if you want to ask your questions first or. Are there any other public comments first before I get into that, I guess?
Public comments on the water commission makeup.
The only thing I can say is the way it's been going right now. Is it okay to talk right now?
Yes, please.
Is the way it's going right now, I believe that the people who are on the general should have a pretty open area as to what they're looking at versus the professionals who are ingrained in the field. Because you want to have people on the outside that have a different perspective than the perspective that may be locked into a specific thought process.
Mhm.
And it's important to have people outside of that venue to look at things, that they may not look at. And I'm sure in your professions, as you've seen, when you have somebody that comes out and you say, I'm gonna do this, and they say, well, how about this idea? And sometimes things come up where you never even thought about it, and it comes out to be a better idea in the long run.
Right.
So those kind of things happen all the time. That's why I think it's important to have somebody from the public that's outside the expertise level.
Great. Thank you, Bert.
So I do have a couple questions. So,
Just making a comment, if I may.
I'm okay.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
So I would largely concur with Mr. McDonald's statements that he made. And I also want to point out that both Mr. McDonald and Mr. Reiser are fairly new to the city. And I don't know if they have had more input to the Water Commission appointments than what they experienced that past round when I was appointed, if that was the first time that came up in their dealings with the city. So, yeah, I think this is an opportunity for all of us to learn and improve going forward.
Okay, thank you.
so from the water department's perspective, if somebody works for, let's say, United Water, but they don't meet the professional, like a professional title, the education, and they don't have that higher level managerial experience, they would not be a water professional, correct?
I mean, I think that would be in terms with the clerk's office in terms of that, but in my reading of the qualifications would be that if they did not hold one of these titles, which is hydrogeologist, civil engineer, water resources manager, or water efficiency professional, then regardless of their actual employer, that they would not qualify as professional.
It's how I read it.
And so in the industry, when we see something like water efficiency professional, that seems like a rather broad and category. Is somebody whose job is installing smart sprinkler controllers a water efficiency professional?
I would say yes.
Okay.
Good point.
Okay. And what about just any general civil engineer with no experience in water?
I think that would be that might be something that would be brought to the
Okay.
committee for review.
Okay. Okay, those are my questions.
Good, thank you. I have a few questions too. I hear what staff has said. I've listened to our public speakers and what our clerk has said. And without being naive, I wanted to say that on the non-professional side, we require people to be a resident because supposedly at the time that this ordinance was written, it was easier to find a non-professional than a professional. And on the professional side, they don't have to be a resident. That to me is more concerning than defining who's a professional and who's not. I guess as we look at the broadness, something like Councilmember Johnson just said, the broadness of what we consider professional, I think I would be looking more, I guess I'm getting into deliberation as opposed to questions. So my questions are, non-professionals have to be residents, professionals don't, right?
Well, for non-professionals, they have to be within the service area.
In the service area,
They
right?
still need to be within the vicinity of the city. So the service area would extend past the city limits into North Ventura Avenue and now Satacoy, or always Satacoy. And then professional did not have residency requirement. I believe, I wasn't here when this was written, but I would say that could be because, one being that might be harder to find professionals, two being that, professional may have experience working in city of Ventura, but not live in city of Ventura, because they, consulting firms located, who work with people in the greater county. So I think that would be two reasons why.
And then as far as the code, or policy being silent on somebody's criteria or changing while they're in office or in that position, that's something that we could recommend at this committee, that the council take a look at it and give it a voice.
That's correct.
Right? And there's two things on that. One was if somebody becomes a professional, whether or not professional. And second thing is whether somebody is a resident or not, and they're non-professional.
And what I would just add to that, Councilmember Halter, is
Yeah.
the terms are different as well. And so if the committee
Oh,
wants to make a
right.
recommendation on adjusting the ability to transfer in and out of seats, the professional category is a 2-year term, the non-professional category is a 4-year term. So that could impact terms as well, which, just as an aside, is more related to number one on the agenda to talk about, but the terms in general.
Got it.
Right now, when there were changes to terms in the 2020 cycle of combining some of our commissions, the terms were kind of set with this end date of June 30th, which has presented us with some challenges of people resigning and having to have someone fill a seat for a couple of months and then apply again, for example. So the only reason I bring that up is there should be some consideration given to the terms as well. And when the terms start, when the terms end, for example, in that regard as well. So I just.
Can I appreciate the clarity? To a little bit more clarity is that it seems to me that a professional candidate can never be a non-professional because they have the title and the experience. And it doesn't matter if they live in the city or not, according to our current policy. So with our current policy, the professional can never take a 4-year term unless we change our policy.
That can be seen as correct. If they were in a retired capacity and there was an extended period of time, they didn't hold certifications any longer, it might be something we would consider, but I would agree with your assessment.
Got it. Okay. Those were my questions. Maybe,
Did you?
Yeah, just a
Yes.
couple comments.
please.
One, again, I wasn't here when the commission was formed, but there has been some questions about what the thinking was and when it was developed. And so just from the staff report from when it was developed, it does say, to be an effective advisory body, the ideal water commission would be composed of a majority of water professionals, a minority of general representatives interested in water resources. And then from the qualifications, it does say a demonstrated special interest, competence, experience in or knowledge of those fields. So not, it doesn't explicitly say holding a job, but all
Demonstrated interest.
Yeah,
Demonstrate interest, yeah.
but it does include experience as well.
It does include for a non-professional.
Experience in the fields.
Okay,
So it's kind of conflicting, because if you have a demonstrated interest,
I know.
you may very well either be in a position, but not one of those titles, but the expectation that you may end up in one of those titles because you have this experience, for example.
You could have knowledge of hydrogeology, but not be a hydrogeologist. So that's kind of, I think there's a little bit, the language here
Yeah.
is, I think why we're having some conflict of professionals being, that don't have the specific experience in the professional category, that are fitting into the non-professional better, but they do perhaps work for an agency that does.
I see that, but just doesn't have that title.
Mhm.
And I see.
For the
Oh.
education.
Interesting. Thank you. Thanks. So deliberation.
Okay, so a couple thoughts here. I mean, first, the 4-year terms and 2-year terms. you know, I think it would be okay if we just made them all 2-year terms and didn't have specific start and end dates. Um, When it comes to, you know, a non-professional, you know, a demonstrated interest means somebody that's been to water commission meetings. That's, I mean, that covers a demonstrated interest. It can't be somebody that, you know, I can't imagine ARC would want to appoint somebody that walks in and says, well, I just heard you have a water commission. And I wanna run for council someday, so, right?
Yeah.
So that's, we have that.
Okay.
I think when we talk about, you know, when somebody changes, the issue is the Nova Clight precedent, which was having a professional serving in a non-professional position. And if we cleared that up, then you would say to somebody, look, you now have one of those titles. You are no longer qualified for a non-professional position. Just as if you moved out of the area, if you lived in the,
Mhm.
in the service area and then moved out, we'd say you're
Yep.
no longer qualified to serve that.
Okay.
You know, we make those determinations all the time.
Mhm.
There's also been, and this is something else. It hasn't been terrible, but there are certainly former water commissioners that that we've hired to do things since they've left the commission. We've had some that resigned from the commission because their firm was going to get a big contract from the city. And so you know, it certainly is a small pool, but I think it's important when we talk about this small pool of professionals that we also really make sure that we have ratepayer representation. And that's why I think it's the service area, is to make sure that we've got 3 people there. The stake that they have in it is the bill that they pay every month.
Right. And the future rates.
Yeah,
They may
Yeah.
pay.
yeah. I will say, at water commission meetings, Mr. Amendola's comments, I endorse them. I've watched meetings where he was ganged up on. I don't know how else to put it, but it was 5-1. And I saw the water commission get real tired of him asking questions, information that he asked for 3 weeks in advance and was not given. And so we need to restore the balance is what I'm getting at. And I think that comes to, you know, making it clear that somebody who qualifies for the professional does not qualify for a non-professional.
Mhm. If I can, I'd like to go ahead and just add that what I see is, I think about my own experience as a landscaper and being cognizant of conserving water or best use of water. I don't by any means consider myself a professional. There's a couple in this room that I would have probably no formal education. I'm not quite sure beyond that, but
Right.
but I think as a chemical engineer, it's more of interest to me because of the fluid flow type scenario. So just the piping and pumping, that's of interest to me. But I like what you said about demonstrating someone who has experience as somebody who went to a water commission. I have never, so I wouldn't qualify.
Right.
Okay, just to be honest. And so that does separate somebody from knowing about water versus having an interest in serving on the commission.
Well, what I say is, you know, professionally, you definitely have an interest in water.
Right.
You know, if you were to apply to the Water Commission as a non-professional and now are on the ARC, what you would do is you would talk about all the stuff that you do as a professional to reduce water consumption and how we as a city need to be doing these things. And you could talk about the turf replacement program and the smart sprinklers and all that.
Yeah.
And honestly, then it'd be like, oh, he hasn't been to a water commission, but he clearly has a demonstrated interest.
Yeah.
I'm saying that it's a pretty low bar. The demonstrated interest is what I'm getting at.
Right. Right.
It's a pretty low bar.
But I wonder if that would exclude somebody like me though from being on a being the non-professional, you know, because
Oh,
you know what I mean? Because I really think that once somebody's a professional,
yeah,
I don't see any way, especially with the criteria that they don't have to live in the city.
right.
I don't see them ever not being a professional. And
Right.
I think the interesting thing to me about the whole thing is it wouldn't have been um, somebody who is paying, if we said anybody on any of our commissions have to live in the city, which I think most of them, they do have to live in our city, or in this case, be a ratepayer. It wouldn't have occurred to me that somebody who had more knowledge about water might not, I guess, after being around it for 20 years or something like this, you start developing more of a fraternal or sorority type arrangement, with your peers, perhaps. So I could see that being more biased than the average ratepayer out there, that 90-year-old that's wanting to keep their lawn versus somebody that doesn't, but the rates keep going up, and so forth. So I could see how that was pretty prudent to think of that. I like the idea of 2-year terms. I think that makes sense for a lot of reasons. And I also think that preferably I would weight things even on professionals. If we had open seats, it appears that that's the hardest one to fill, usually is a professional. No. Then, but I would weight it in such a way that if they were a ratepayer, I would weight them higher.
Oh, okay.
When appointing.
Well, but that's, yeah, I mean, certainly the ARC.
Yeah,
You
that's
consider that, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Do you mind if I make a point,
Please.
Barkley? For demonstrated interest, when we receive applications, the way it's demonstrated is in a CV. I believe for these applications, a CV is required. So that's how we sort of,
What is required?
A
a
resume.
resume.
Oh,
A resume is required to be attached. And so that's how these candidates are sort of proving that they have a demonstrated interest, because there's, I would say in my experience, which is limited, but I do have, records from the past 10 years, more than that. It does tend to be people who have something that is on a resume that says, yep, I was part of this board, I was part of this, I worked in this industry. So we do get a lot of professionals. From our perspective, it would be how to have the non-professional category specifically be for those people who haven't worked in the water industry, as opposed to just every year ARC, depending on the makeup, determines, okay, well, we're going to go more for, we want just ratepayers, people who attend water commission meetings, people who aren't really professional, aren't retirees, and another commission, as has happened in the past. We'll just go with, oh, wow, you have a lot of experience. This is great. You're not currently operating as a hydrogeologist, so you do fit this category.
Good. It kind of reminded me of the first time I had ran years ago. I really didn't know much about how government ran, and that one of the questions was about there's too much trash at the harbor, and what's your plan to do something about it? And I remember my response, getting a lot of laughs, is I would get more trash cans. Well, that's what I think a ratepayer would probably say when it comes to water, is they would hear the discussion about this option or that option, and so they at least give that perspective from a complete layperson standpoint on what might be the obvious thing right in front of them. That perhaps we're digging too deep. Yeah, go ahead.
And I will say, this goes back to the water rate shortage task force, which is the political reality, which is that task force, and to a large extent, the water commission, exist to provide political cover to the council when it comes to water rates. So that we as a council can say, I know you don't like it, but we got this water commission and they spent a lot of time looking at it, and they did that. As a council, as a councilman, if I'm saying the water commission did that, and but only of the 6 people, only one of them is really just there as a ratepayer, I've got no cover, right? We need to be able to say this. Now we can say that somebody that qualifies for the professional does not qualify for the non-professional, and that just ends that ambiguity. I have a question for you, Mr. Reiser. But so right? If somebody sends in their resume and they have no experience in water, but they still apply for the water commission, it still shows up to ARC, right? They're not weeded out?
Yes, so depend, I mean, if they were to submit a professional application, I would probably send that application off to somebody in
Okay.
GNOC or somebody to say, hey, this is what we received. And non-professional, probably also because of that word demonstrated.
Mhm.
The only demonstration we have is the application is in writing. So if they don't say, I'm an avid follower of the Water Commission, it's ambiguous. Yeah. So what we do, we don't reject anything due to that factor.
Okay.
Okay,
So,
Mhm.
so I think, we could add language that says, add a sentence in there that says,
There's the Maddie Act that
Yeah.
has the
Yeah.
exact wording.
but add a sentence in there, under the 3 members of the Water Commission shall be persons with demonstrated special interest. Add into there, that who do not qualify for a professional position. And, so I think we can do that. I think we can, I don't know, does the water department have, language on what a broader definition of a professional might be?
I didn't bring any today.
Okay, but you have
We
some
could
ideas?
come up with something.
Okay,
We could propose that.
and the water department could come up with broader language,
Mhm.
Especially with wastewater,
Mhm.
to make sure that we've got all that covered.
Okay, so you're saying further define professional, and that a professional cannot not be a non-professional.
Well,
Right.
so for professionals, broaden the category,
Got it?
broaden the category. Under the definition of non-professional, say you don't, it's only for people who don't qualify for the professional position.
Correct. Okay,
Change the terms to 2 years.
Yeah.
And any language about dates
oh, yeah,
needs to be,
that if a non-professional becomes a.
well, this will be,
So that-
this will be fixed, because if a non-professional becomes a professional, they no longer qualify for the seat.
So they have 60 days to vacate, right?
Yeah,
Maybe something like that.
right, which has happened once.
Okay,
It's happened once.
I mean, you get so interested, they get a job doing it. I mean, I can see that happening.
Right.
Okay, especially these days.
But is there language about the terms, the dates in the ordinance?
There's language about that initial kind of change in the structure of the committee in 2020, but there's not real guidance about when the term starts. It was kind of that first initial change where they changed the commission, said that the terms
Right.
would all kind of start and end on this.
That might be more of a broader advisory group's recommendation.
Yeah.
Like across the board as opposed to
Oh,
a singular.
I see. If somebody no longer qualifies, make that a broader.
Well, and the,
Boy,
with
for
with the
any
terms in
commissions.
general, and best practices I've seen, the term starts the day you get appointed, for example. The
Okay,
day that it's approved by council, your term starts.
Yeah.
And it ends, if it's 2 years, then for example, it ends 2 years from that date.
got it.
But this is the only one that has, everyone else is 4 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the only one where they
So
set
this-
this kind of structure in 2020 when they adjusted and combined some things where they said, for example, all terms end on June 30th.
Yeah,
Which has presented us with challenges because folks have resigned. And for example, someone is interviewing for a 3-month position and then have to reapply because it says their term ends June 30th.
got it.
When really the term should just start and end when they get appointed and when their term ends. Is kind of best practices.
I like that, but I think that is for the broader picture for all the commissions and committees. Yeah, but we could say that when we get to number 1.
Mhm.
Okay, yeah, okay. Is there anything else that we should be adding to this consideration, this motion?
I have a question for Mr. McDonald and Mr. Reiser on this term issue, because as you point, most other things are 4 years. 2 years is good. Would it make sense for council to have the ability to make it 2.5 years, just to give some flexibility so that we're not necessarily looking at a bunch of people all being, having their terms end at the same time.
Yeah, thank you for that, Councilmember Johnson. It's, I think was the original reason as to why terms were set was for that reason? Yes. What I would say is the council can set any length of term. I think in general, I would say 4 years is a big commitment for a volunteer to sit on a commission for 4 years. So the council could set any term you want. The staggering piece is the piece that we kind of always find ourselves back trying to navigate how you don't swap 5 out of 7 commissioners in one sitting, which is happening now by virtue of the number of seats that have been unscheduled vacancies. So it's a challenge, but what I'd say is the unscheduled vacancies, I think we've seen more in the past 2 years than we had seen prior. And the unscheduled vacancies have presented us with big challenges in filling those terms. So the staggered piece is always a consideration. I haven't yet found the magic answer to how you not have a majority of people at the same time. So we still have to explore that piece and determine what that looks like. I would say also a majority of folks, if you had a shorter term, you may have more folks applying for their second term as opposed to when it's a 4-year term. So you might, for example, in that instance, not have as much of a turnover because those folks are going to reapply. But it's a consideration for sure.
I would add that if we did go with 2 or 2.5 year terms and somebody vacated 6 months before the term was over, in order to keep this staggering, so we have historical knowledge moving forward, I think I'd be in favor of that person that's now that we appoint, add on that 6 months, whatever, just so we could keep the staggering going forward, doing something like that to help solve that problem. The other question is in regards to conflict of interest. That's something that's been really a tough one as a council member and somebody that's been involved, as we both have over these many years, is conflict of interest and then perceived conflict of interest. But if somebody was a partner in life or otherwise with somebody who is one of those professionals, would that be a conflict for that person?
Okay.
Yeah.
Whole separate issue. I'm gonna go back to the, a way to add some language to fiddle with the 2-year terms. We could say for 2, 24 or 30-month terms. And then when we're recruiting it, it can just sort of be, which is it gonna be? And it's such a small difference. I think everybody understand the point of that is for staggering.
Just staggering.
But to do like 24 or 30-month terms.
I would almost leave that up to see, I don't have it right in front of me, the dates that people's terms are expiring.
Yeah.
Whatever it looks like would work with the vacancies that we have now.
Yes.
Well, what I would add to that, if I may,
Here's what we have.
Okay, thank
the staggering, the continuation of those terms is the biggest piece that has caused us with a lot of confusion, because if there's 6 months left, for example, folks are going to come in and interview and get appointed for that 6 months and they have to reapply in 6 months again. And so even if it's 3 months, for example, which we have a situation now where somebody's being appointed for 3 months. So you find yourself in that situation. That's the challenge with somebody picking up another term. Now, keep in mind, if somebody did have an unscheduled vacancy and that would change their appointment date, it would also change their end date, which would automatically
Right.
stagger the
Staggering.
appointment as well, because what you find is if you were to look at our appointments over this past year, for example, the clerk's office used to be able to kind of keep this rhythm of November or December and June as like the 2 kind of processes in time where you would appoint. There's been so many unscheduled vacancies since that has just found it to be impossible. But by doing this kind of rolling basis, you would in turn somewhat control the staggering basis, because the end date is going to be based off of when they were appointed. So everyone's end date would be different potentially could be different, for
Mhm.
example. So
Mhm.
it would help us a little bit. But if you found yourself, for example, with a recent commission who 5 members resigned at the same time, now you open up 5, there's really kind of not a way in that instance to have staggered. So we find ourselves in that situation where you wouldn't, it would be difficult to find a staggered because all 5 people may end up being confirmed on the same day, which then their term would be exactly the same. But in instances of unscheduled vacancies, it's almost like they stagger
Got it.
themselves because the end date will be whatever based off of their appointment date.
Got it.
And so
If that makes sense.
Yeah, it
and
does.
it does make sense. The concern I have is that it's going to take a while for the current terms to have unscheduled vacancies to break out of that cycle.
Mhm.
And so I was just thinking if we said 24 or 30 months, that, 24 or 30 months to maximize staggering,
Mhm.
then it would just be easier to, to
Try to make
when
it-
when we're looking at, say, this one should be a 24-month one, this one should be a 30-month one, so that we're not in the same position 24 months from now, trying to get 2 water commissioners. And
I like where we're going with this. I'm curious though, on your comment though, Mr. Clerk, is, it has, we say there's been more, unscheduled vacancies recently. Is it mainly through, across the board? Is it mainly because of COVID, the changes with COVID, or what's happened with the economy, people moving, things like that? Or is it just
Well,
have evolved into this?
I think there's probably a number of reasons.
Yeah, I handle
Yeah.
these, well, I've handled these for the past 2 years, and I can't say that there's like a general consensus, or even that we receive like a response as to why someone is resigning. It differs. So,
Yeah,
but I mean, the way that everything is already staggered and the way these terms began, would suggest that there have been a number of unscheduled vacancies even before, Michael took the role of city clerk, because they're fairly scattered.
Yeah.
Even though previous clerks did try to keep it at the June.
The June or November?
And I would just add to it that I think in general, as someone who was a former commissioner myself, for the city of Oakland, 4 years is a very long commitment and a lot can change in 4 years.
Mhm.
And I think the unscheduled vacancies that I have been a part of for the past 2 years have been a number of reasons, right? They've been unhappiness with the commission and how it operates.
Mhm.
And I would say a majority of them have been a time commitment changed. Something changed. In
Oh,
someone's
got
personal
it.
life.
Yeah.
They got a job.
Yeah.
They moved. They could no longer keep this commitment because of night meetings and children.
Yeah.
Whatever the case may be, I think that it is a 4-year commitment is a lot to ask the folks, and a lot can happen in 4 years.
No, I gotta say is that when I look at what it takes to onboard new council members, every 2 years. It's some very lively people today. It's not quite the library it used to be. Just onboarding new council members there's a lot of knowledge that in meeting with all the different departments, all the people. When you get into more complex commissions, I would consider planning commission, the water commission in particular to be 2 of those. I could see it getting almost comparable to what we had to go through as council members.
But we don't. There's no onboarding.
There's no onboarding.
Not really, no.
Yeah.
You have to ruin it, don't you?
I mean, here's the thing. This is a problem, the matrix report.
Yeah.
You need to have an onboarding system for your HPC, your DRC, your planning commission. We have no onboarding, none. If we as a city council actually think that we need to do onboarding, then all of this changes, right?
Yeah.
Because if we have to do onboarding, then we need terms.
Yeah.
But it can't be staggered, right? Because they would rather have an incoming class of 4 people
Right.
rather than every 6 months having a new person starting in. But we don't onboard. Were you onboarded?
Am I allowed to speak?
Yeah.
Okay, so again, going back to my comments about Mr. Reiser being new, Mr.
Yeah.
McDonald being so relatively new, and me not having previous experience, filled out the application. And at the application, it said at the bottom about the fair political practice disclosure. I didn't know what that was. it was never put forth in front of me like when I was appointed that I had to deliver something within the timeframe. The onboarding was kind of, spoon fed to me. It wasn't like, here's a checklist of all the things you have to do.
Mhm.
Now, again, I can't say that's the fault of anybody because these people just took over previous existing practices.
Mhm.
And I believe that they were still getting their feet wet with the roles and responsibilities in this office.
Got it.
So again, I look at this as a learning opportunity and an opportunity for improvement going forward. If I were to somehow consider reapplying for the role, I would like to see all of the requirements that I would have to meet at the application process.
That's something we could talk about in
In the
agenda item number
Yeah,
one.
but then in
But-
addition, with the workday solution that the city committed to paying $15 million plus for the next 10 years, I believe that some of the onboarding may be able to be built into the workday.
Well, my question was also about, did anybody sit down with you and explain what the protocols are, how motions are made, how the water commission's relationship is with the city council?
So there was an onboarding meeting or an introduction meeting. Yes, and that took
Yeah,
place at
the
the
department.
water department's office in San Juan.
Yeah.
Specifically, I don't recall an exercise about motion making or things like that.
Okay,
I don't recall that that was an agenda item as part of that meeting.
Mhm.
That was more of an introductory meeting
sure.
about who we would be working
Right.
with and, deliverables of agendas, et cetera.
Okay,
And
yeah,
then a high level overview, but there wasn't like a training, if you will.
okay. Thank you. We,
Yep.
I
Oh,
can do it.
okay.
I can do it.
Yeah, Mary. go ahead.
no, so,
Did I accurately?
Yeah, that's fine. I was gonna add a couple comments. but-
my point on this is, like, we have seen this at HPC where our own staff appealed an HPC decision and said it's inadequate because they didn't make findings. Well, nobody told the HPC that they need to make findings or how to do it.
Right. I see.
So, I would love to see us move towards a position where we're onboarding.
Mhm.
We're just not. And I would say if we want to, that's not really an ARC issue.
Mhm. It's a,
It's a council issue.
it is.
And it's just if council wants to do that, then we would probably have to go back and look at all of the committees and commissions. So then what do we do when there's a vacancy? And so it's really a council decision.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilman Johnson. Mary, you had a comment?
Yeah, I'll just add, I was
Some
just gonna add
information.
that we don't have an official onboarding process that's dictated to us while we're following a checklist. We do have sort of an iterative process we follow where, we're seeing that, council, water commissioners are coming in and they're asking questions, or when they're leaving, they're like, oh, it would have been nice if you'd done this. And so we try to address those issues as we go.
Mhm.
So, I think this last time we had 3 our new water commissioners coming on. And so we did have an introductory meeting where we did a presentation where we kind of went over all the issues with what, there's different, just factual
Mhm.
of different departments of the water department
Right.
and what we're doing, and a little bit about what the water commission's purview is and what they do. But not very many logistics on, as Mr. Johnson mentioned, but motion making things, but we do have regular Brown Act trainings during the water commission meetings, where Miles Hogan provides that training. And we try to schedule those when new water commissioners are coming on, or every few years as a refresher.
Got
So
it.
we don't have an official process. We do try to address those issues as we go.
And Chair Holter, if I might
Yes.
just add as well.
Please.
We have an adopted handbook for all of our city commissioners. And that handbook is provided to them. One thing I will note is as it relates to the onboarding process, I agree with Councilmember Johnson that we could have a more robust
Mhm.
onboarding for certain. The challenge right now is the onboarding process is up to the department of the board commission or committee itself.
Hmm.
And so there's inconsistent processes by which how Department A might onboard Department B. So we do have the handbook, which is provided. While I agree, we don't sit down necessarily and go through the handbook in depth. The information about Rosenberg's rules, for example, the FPC,
Yeah.
the relationship with council, the relationship with the public. I wholeheartedly agree that we could be better at that onboarding.
Mhm.
What I will note from the onset, just as Mr. Amendola noted, the application itself does indicate that this is a public position that requires public filing. So if there's opportunity for us to look at our applications, for example, if our communication is not clear, then there is a real opportunity for us to take a look at that. I would just note as well that while 2 years is not a long time, Derek and I have been very involved in this process for 2 years. And I would just note that I've managed the process for 3 other jurisdictions as well. So I'm looking at it holistically from best practices and taking the experience of our current commissioners and seeing how we can make it better. And I agree that the onboarding process is one of those areas where we could improve.
Councilwoman Johnson.
Okay, before we finish this up and go back to the conflicts, one of the things that I remember was about 6 years ago,
Uh-huh.
the Water Commission wrote a letter appealing to council over how the meetings were being run, how the agendas were being set. Proper onboarding, you would not have something like that. Either the Water Commission would better understand its role or staff would better understand the role of the Water Commission. And so that's an ongoing problem. And it's something that we have an opportunity as a council
Yeah.
to fix, but we as an ARC do not.
Here, I just want to comment that I get what everyone's saying, because I gotta tell you that you don't know what you don't know. And no matter how smart or how involved or what your experience is, you just don't know. There's been rules in place that you somehow magically you're supposed to understand that if you're not told by your city clerk to do it, or maybe did once or twice and it doesn't stick until you tell me 3 or 4 times. But all that said is that it sure would be great if there was a bit more consistency between the commissions that we have with those departments that house those commissions. So that's the bigger topic, item 1. And then 2 is I have this with another commission I'm on. So it's more, we need more than just the mission of that, or the purpose of that commission. We need a description of, again, how we set the agenda, who sets that agenda. Those are things that I've run up against in 3.5 years. Because it's too easy of so much on everyone's plate, whether it's homework, home stuff, or whether it's at city council. You look at the mission and you're adhering to the mission, you're doing what others have done before you,
Well,
So,
and we're getting way off.
way off, yeah.
But it's important to note that, we have stuff that is set up by state law, by our charter, by ordinance, by resolution. We have subcommittees, we have ad hoc committees, we have committees,
Mhm.
we have commissions.
I know.
Right, and so that's something yeah. But I think we should move on to the conflict thing. So,
Okay.
and the interesting thing about this is right, when you do an application process, it says the required disclosure is if your spouse works for the city. But there's nothing in there that's like, do you work for the spouse of a city employee? But I understand legally we can't
Yeah.
get into that, right? All we can really ask is, if you're married to a city employee or child of a city employee.
See, I think, and again, as we look at the 3 issues on our agenda today, I think that whole issue again, relates to the entirety of the
Okay.
commission committees.
Yeah.
So why don't we finish up the water?
Let's-
And then let's get back to that though.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, that was that was
yeah.
the comment that came in.
Yes.
Okay.
From here, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think where we're at is maybe going to recommending that we go to 2-year or 2.5-year terms
Mm-hmm.
across the board for the Water Commission. And also, let's see, my notes aren't real good.
To provide staggering, we should have the language in there that the point is to provide staggering of terms.
Provide staggering. And 2 to 2.5 years, whatever it takes to provide that staggering.
Yeah.
Let's see, and that a professional can never be a non-professional,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Put that in there.
Yeah.
What I missed, there's one more.
The language, broadening the language.
Oh, yeah, broadening, yeah,
Professional.
broadening the language. Oh, you get this down? The question. Okay. I think that's everything I had written down.
Okay.
Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Okay, is there a motion?
Well, I would move that.
Okay, I'll second that.
Okay.
Okay,
And I just want to make sure it's the understanding on the language for the professional is that we just trust the water department to come up with something.
We can bring it back if you would like.
So are you asking Ventura Water to broaden the category of non-professional
Or professional,
to professional to
Include, for example, wastewater, which is.
include wastewater and then also and then for non-professional, are you looking to deter water professionals from?
Yes, yeah, we would have language that says anybody who qualifies for a professional does not qualify for a non-professional.
So for clarification, would you all prefer to have that updated language come back here for final approval, or would you, is that recommendation for the city council as it stands?
Public council, yeah, I would
Yeah,
agree with that.
yeah.
Yeah, let's do that.
What are we gonna do, like object?
I know, that's very good.
So just
Yeah.
in terms of next steps, then what we'll do is we'll work with staff because the changes would require an ordinance.
Yeah.
Change to the municipal code. So we'll work with staff and the city attorney's office on what that ordinance change might look like. And we'll keep the committee up to date in terms of the timing for when that will come back to council.
Excellent,
Does that
very
work?
good.
That worked. That's the motion I make.
Okay, you got it, and I'll second that.
Okay.
Okay, so
And in that motion, there's specificity about that professionals cannot be,
non-professionals, professionals cannot,
And essentially, if you qualify.
cannot be a non-professional.
cannot be. And then you're changing both non-professional and professional to 2-year terms with the interest of staggering.
2 to 2.5 year terms, 24 to 30.
We're gonna leave that up to council, information that comes back,
Well, I would think that,
stagger it.
I mean, I would think we could trust the city clerk's office to decide.
I would,
That's why I'm thinking if we do a smaller window, like 24 to 30 months, then
Yeah.
by all means, the clerk can, it just give the clerk some flexibility.
Yeah, and in the original language when the last ordinance was adopted, there was language for the current commissioners and how it would apply to them. So I would envision we would just do the same thing and we would have a provision for the current commissioners and how it applies to them and set the new 2-year term to start once these commissioners have all funneled off and
Yeah,
we find ourselves with a new commission. That's how it was handled last time. So I envision we would probably do the same thing to
Mhm.
provide language for the current commissioners.
yeah, I like that.
Yeah, because everybody we have 2 in the professionals that they're in the middle of a 2-year term
Mhm.
and everybody else finishes this year.
However, these new terms won't be approved prior to the appointment, I imagine, of our new commissioners,
Right,
which
okay,
will take place in June. The idea is to have them onboarded by the end of June.
okay.
Depending on the timing for the ordinance, we probably wouldn't have first, second reading and 30-day.
Right,
Which might present us with a challenge for this current recruitment because those folks in the non-professional categories are going to get a 4-year term.
Mhm.
Starting in June. So we'll look at that and we'll look at the language and see how we might best address that.
Okay.
If that
Okay.
makes sense.
Yeah, okay, that sounds good. So motion on the floor, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Motion passes. And thank you. Thanks, staff. Thanks, city clerks. Appreciate that. There's 2 things, so just remind me when we get to item 1. Okay, we're going to go to number 2 next. the conflict of interest for handling number one.
Yeah.
And
Writing
there's one other thing. That other thing was what happens if somebody no longer meets the criteria of being on that commission,
Okay,
whether that be professional, non-professional, or resident, non-resident,
right,
whatever, something changed while they're on that commission.
right,
Do we give them a certain time period
okay.
to get off that commission?
When they lose their qualifications.
So that should be an item number one.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
moving on to item number two.
DPAC, the Downtown Parking Advisory.
Oh, yeah, okay. All right, so. Here we start here. We had a low turnout for, how many openings do we have now?
We have one, currently one.
And there's a total of 5, right?
We have the one current and this committee may recall the request from council to pause the current recruitment process and to send the requirements back to this committee for review. Because the one challenging piece since the inception of the committee has been the property owner designation. So the property owner designation at times has sat vacant for 3 years, a year and a half. Currently for more than a year. That's really been the challenge, is the property owner seat. And so current recruitment is paused with one applicant, technically 2 applicants. Then came the question around whether or not a Airbnb owner, for example, a licensed Airbnb operator in the city, if that qualified as a commercial property, which is not technically, right?
It's not.
Yeah, and so it kind of goes along the same questions, which we'll say for item 1 about verification, but that's how this item came about when we referred to the committee to review the qualifications.
Got it.
Just quickly for clarity, we have one opening that we have struggled to fill.
Okay.
We have another vacancy coming up at the end of June. If this person doesn't reapply, and otherwise, City Council not only asked you to review the membership qualifications, but also the mission
Yeah.
and authority, so entirety of DPAC.
Right.
And I'm the one that has been like, I was the one that was going after DPAC. So, okay, we have a couple things. The first is,
Go ahead.
I attended DPAC meetings for years before running for council.
Before you get into, unless you have questions, should we ask for public?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
first?
yeah.
Do we have public comments on this?
We don't have any public comments on this. We do have a member, we do have staff if you want to ask them questions in the future.
Okay, can we ask questions?
You're the chair.
All
You're the
right.
chair.
Hey, well, that we're being held to protocols here.
Well,
So I'm trying to make sure I'm doing.
no,
my job.
So,
Yeah.
The Downtown Parking Advisory Committee, I attended those meetings for years. There's a whole separate issue, and I greatly appreciate everything the clerk's office has been doing to get that to look like other committees. Because this is a committee that was meeting, there wouldn't be minutes published.
Oh,
The staff reports that were provided in writing and not always to members of the public and weren't published anywhere.
okay.
Where DPAC has really had an impact would be on discussions. They've talked about increases in meter rates.
Hmm.
They've gotten themselves into a little mess in talking about the expansion of paid parking, because as you can imagine, council members like to be the ones are wary of that. And then they played a big part when the proposed parking garage at the farmer's market lot.
Yeah.
That died at a DPAC meeting pre-COVID.
Oh. I did not know that.
Okay, so we have that. I will say, it was difficult for me reaching out to a DPAC member who was completely unaware of the actions council had taken on the parking structure and the expansion of paid parking and didn't even know about it. Because that wasn't really being discussed
Mhm.
at the DPAC meetings. But then there's this other thing, which is these freaking eligibility requirements. And 2 members shall be residents within, 1 who shall be a business owner or the owner of a commercial property, and then 1 shall be the owner of a commercial property within the downtown parking district area, and 1 shall be a city resident appointed by a downtown organization, meaning DVP gets to pick somebody, and then 2 members of that are city residents. And so we have all this at the same time that we're setting up a parking authority
Mhm.
that is supposed to be making decisions on the parking lot at Seaward, right?
Yeah.
Or the Midtown parking lots.
Yeah, yeah.
So I would like us to consider a parking advisory committee rather than specifically a downtown parking advisory committee.
And that parking advisory committee would then report, be the vetting for the parking authority.
For when we as council sit as the parking.
It is parking authority.
Yeah.
Okay. I'd like to give, Sergio's here from, traffic. I'd like to give you an opportunity to share anything you know about, this district and help us make any decisions.
I struggled as I walked up, just 'cause I really just wasn't sure where we were going with this conversation, so I don't really have much to share at this time. Coincidentally, my manager was just calling me right now, so I was gonna see if maybe he wanted to come up, but at this point, I don't have any comments.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be
But feel
great.
free to ask.
If he's available to come here, that would
Sure.
be great. I think
Yeah. Yeah.
just to get some feedback on how we got to where we're at and
Right.
how, I'd like to know how you're envisioning the parking authority working, but so far I'm agreeing with advisory committee concept, which means do we not fill this position? We're going to have another one open soon, or does this become a park?
I think
Yeah.
what I would suggest is making it a parking advisory committee, keeping the people that are on there, right?
Yeah.
And making more vague the eligibility requirements.
Yeah, and then the only thing now, once the parking authority gets formed, if I was a Midtown business or something and they're considering the parking structure, I would want to make sure somebody from that area at least has a voice on that,
Right, right.
So how do we change that? How fast are we doing it? I mean, the parking authorities, it's been already created, right?
Yes, we pushed ahead on that
Yeah.
over staff's strong objections. Over staff's very strong objections, we said, no, get the parking authority set up by June 30th. So the parking authority is in place
Okay.
July 1st.
So,
Right? Yeah.
I think there's, comments.
Well, you want to just let them say it?
Yeah, just go ahead. I'll let you, yeah, thank you.
Okay, so just listening and paying attention to this issue
Yeah.
for the years. Listening to the requirements, I've read those before, but it seems that there's a conflict with people from the DVP appointing people to the committee. And again, there's not necessarily representation of the public at large because of the nature of how that is structured. But I think maybe it's semantics, because instead of having a committee, I said, in my comments, I said, make it a commission. But then realizing now that there's a parking authority would have to operate as a quasi judicial body.
Exactly.
So then that kind of solves the issue.
Right.
Why do you even need a committee if you have the authority?
Mhm.
But it's just a matter of understanding the Muni code for the authority, because there needs to be a Muni code.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
you're right.
And the parking authority is comprised of city council.
Right.
The
Yeah.
7 city council members are the parking authority.
But if city council wants
Yeah.
advice from the general public, then you.
So, and
Right.
we do have 2 members of DPAC shall just be residents of the city. Is that your point?
We currently have.
That was your point.
Okay. What I'm wondering is that as I look at these qualifications, is starting from the bottom, E, the 2 members of city residents at large, that would work. Moving.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
1 member shall be a city resident has been, moving the D, has been recommended for the appointment by downtown organization. That could work if we want to give that preference to the DVP or downtown
And
organization.
that's what it's been, we let DVP appoint somebody.
So that could still work since a lot of the parking is in
Yeah.
downtown. 1 member shall be the owner of commercial property situated within a downtown parking district. I kind of think that one probably has to become a business or commercial property owner situated in the city of
And
Ventura.
this is the one we've had trouble with, yes.
The
The-
property owner.
The owner of a commercial property. right?
Yeah.
This is one we've had trouble with.
Okay, so I think that's the one I would want to change to the city of Ventura once we have this parking authority in place next month. You know? And then on B, 1 member shall be either a business owner, operator, or manager whose business is within the downtown parking district, or the owner of a commercial property situated within the downtown parking district. I think business owner, operator, or manager whose business is within the city of Ventura.
Well, let's back up for a second.
Okay,
And then A is 2 residents in the downtown parking district area. So I'm saying we want to keep, right?
Yeah.
Keep the people that we have.
Yeah.
Who obviously focus on downtown.
Yeah.
At some point, they're going to,
be turned down.
or whatever.
Yeah.
We still have, the only place we're charging for parking right now is downtown.
Yeah.
So I expect we'll be looking at charging for parking at the Seaward parking lot.
Yeah.
I don't know that we'll be charging for parking anywhere else. So do we want to say,
Yeah.
because it could be a business owner, operator, or manager whose business, or a commercial property owner whose property is situated within a 1/4 mile of paid parking?
It's a good question.
You should-
Let me ask you this before I answer.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
just FYI, there are plans and discussions for a public street on Spinnaker.
Oh, that's right.
That's right.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah,
thank you.
the other point that would be discussed in the future too, I suspect, in the parking advisory, is a combined use with low-income housing possibly. And I know some of that has come up, especially in the midtown area.
Yes.
Okay. So, huh,
Okay,
yeah, so.
that's a whole other,
Yeah, it kind of throws it.
but I think that the harbor is a fantastic point.
Yeah.
That we have to, I
Yeah.
think we have to change some of this to,
City of Ventura or,
well, we could just say City of Ventura, or we could say within a 1/4 mile of paid parking
paid parking
Facilities.
within the city of Ventura.
in the city,
Yeah.
right? Because what do you think?
Yeah, I know.
Point of order? Question,
Please.
does the parking authority oversee the boundaries within the harbor district?
That's a good question.
Spinnaker.
I don't know that.
Spinnaker.
That's Spinnaker we do, not a lot,
Oh, but not the lots.
not the lots.
Spinnaker, yes, the city does.
Okay,
Very good clarity. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
all right.
So I'm torn with, because, for instance, the whole discussion about paid parking downtown,
Mhm.
we've gotten a lot of input from residents generally across the board, so I would want to have one of those voices, one of the 7 at least,
Right.
be that voice being heard in the discussion in decision making. So I kind of, maybe that's E,
Well,
E is somebody not within, that doesn't fit the other
right.
4 categories.
Okay, so, okay, well, let's back up for one thing.
Okay,
Does 7 make sense as the number?
I kind of think it's not less than that. I think on
Okay,
something
think 7?
we need.
Okay, that's fine.
I was even, in my mind, it's funny you should ask, because I was thinking it could even be 9.
Wow. Wow.
Well, that's the size I'll go, but I'm used to sitting on large boards, so,
Yeah. Well, let's,
yeah,
I'm not saying no to 9,
okay.
but so if we did 7, okay, so we need to have
Sergio was like, he perked up when I said that though.
19. 19, how big is, how big is? How big is-
Okay. All right, go ahead.
Okay, so first we have residents who, it may, you know, DPAC having two members who are residents who live within the downtown parking district area. That makes sense because it affects their parking. That said, they're able to buy monthly passes for us all.
Oh.
Right? So we have that. And then we have just the general one. So if we say 7, are we looking at, like, how many do you, out of 7, do you think 3 of those should be residents of some sort, either downtown or elsewhere? Do you think 4 of them should be residents?
If we'd have 9, is that what I'm saying?
Let's start with 7.
Let's start with 7.
Let's just try.
I liked E a lot,
Yeah.
saying that 2 members shall be city residents appointed to represent parking in general.
Okay.
That's a good one. So if it was 7, 2 is probably the good number.
Well, what about
I
8?
heard that. A would be 2 members shall be city residents whose principal address is within the downtown parking district. I think that's where you go to your quarter mile concept. Within a quarter mile of paid parking.
So do you want to say, we could say 2 general and then 5 who are within a quarter mile, and they could be any mix of business owners, property owners, residents?
Yep. I kind of liked the breakdown of how this was,
Mhm.
and that's why I think I would change on A, go to within a quarter mile of
Okay.
paid parking, and not just define to downtown, because there's other ways. We have one that is specifically for downtown, and that's D, 1 member shall be a city resident.
Right, we have that.
Yeah, that's for downtown, okay. A 1 member shall be owner of commercial property situated within the downtown parking. I think that's 1 member shall be an owner, I think a commercial property owner. Because they have the P bed, I'm almost tempted to keep that one like that.
But that's the one we can't ever get anybody to fill. And here's the thing, right? So when you say, we really want to have that position on the board, then does the board lose legitimacy when you cannot have somebody in that position?
Yeah,
Right?
I think that becomes a weighting matter then. So we make it broader.
Right.
And if somebody comes in that happens to have a business, owns a commercial property in downtown, we would probably want to weight them greater.
Yeah, well, that's an
Right.
ARC thing, right?
It's an ARC thing.
So 2 general, 1 for DVP, and then 4 business owners, operators, managers,
Right.
owners of properties or residents within a quarter mile. So it basically just says anybody who has
Yeah,
something going on and within a quarter mile of paid parking.
Yeah. I like that.
Okay,
So that gives, that's the 7.
that's 7. 2 general, 1 appointed by a downtown organization.
Yeah,
And,
yeah. And I think that's the right ratio. I don't think I would go to 9 then. I was thinking 9 because I thought I might need to have more residents at large, but we have to.
yeah.
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 I'm happy. Is there, now that we liberated.
Okay, so then there's some, well, I'm sure Michael McDonald has some thoughts now.
Yeah,
No, I think, thank you, for that. I think the new requirements would help because I think what we see is there are managers, for example, that would be interested in serving, but they're not the property owner. And so since they only have that one designation, we've heard from more business owners or business managers who I do think have a valuable input because they're interacting with the staff, which we talk so much about is
Mhm.
working downtown, right? So I think that going with that path is, I would say is a good approach from a staff's perspective. I don't know
Well-
if Derek has something to add.
I would say that as far as downtown organization is concerned,
mhm.
there is sort of a question that I've had, and I think a few others have had, are we just sort of coordinating somebody who's already, been decided upon, or is ARC really making a true decision about if we accept this nominee from a downtown organization, which is DVB?
Oh.
The language maybe could be clarified to determine is ARC just rubber stamping it, or are they truly, okay, here's the
Oh, that's a
DVP's nominee
I
and
think
we're
it's been the same.
I think it's a rubber stamp.
I tend to, I may not always like that rubber stamp, but,
Right.
but I tend to think it's probably a rubber stamp.
I think, you
They've
know,
already vetted it.
it's
so-
possible, it is absolutely possible that DVP could nominate Peter Goldenring to serve. And ARC could decide whether or not, yeah. Yeah,
Well, I mean, regardless of who it is in the future, it may be other issues that we may want to protect ourselves from, and that's, I'm not sure what that is, but as we consider the water commission,
hmm
there's going to be more added to this, I think, what that would further define that DVP appointment,
hmm
and that could be a conflict. I mean, it could be, somebody that has, what do you call, I'm thinking possibly somebody who has filed a suit against parking in their neighborhood. So, you know what I mean? I don't know. I mean, I kind of feel there's something more that needs to be added to that at some point.
Well, without getting too far astray.
Yeah.
Our management agreement with Downtown Ventura Partners requires that anybody sitting on the board recuse themselves on any DVP business in which they have a direct financial interest, which I would argue would include suing the city
Yeah.
for something in downtown. So
So,
that's a whole separate issue, but it also doesn't specify DVP. Council can say DVO.
it could be, yeah, it's just as a downtown organization here.
Yeah.
Could be DPO, could be DVP.
We could change it to a community organization.
Mhm.
And I think right now, since we're definitely looking at primarily downtown,
Mhm.
we would understand that it's downtown.
Right.
But, if we charge the parking advisory committee with looking at Midtown parking lots and turning them into doing ground leases, maybe then the community organization that we approach would be the Midtown Community Council.
Yeah.
Right?
I think so.
So we could just change that to a community, to a nonprofit community organization.
I like that, because I could even see the same thing with the college,
Right.
We don't have control of the college area. I mean, but the streets we do though.
Right. Right.
I like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, not a downtown organization, but
Mhm.
make it broader, a nonprofit community organization.
Yeah.
And then council will have to, at some point, decide.
In which case, then it's no longer a rubber stamp, because now it's more than one organization.
Right. Well, so right now it's DVP,
Right.
and I'm sure that was a resolution that was taken.
I don't know.
I would guess there was a resolution
Okay.
that gave DVP the ability
It would make sense.
to fill that role. But council could certainly look at that. And again, I think because we should change it to just the parking advisory committee, right?
Yeah.
And,
So far, we have the makings of another policy consideration for another motion, right?
yeah,
Yes, you could take a motion now, and then keep discussing, but I feel you could also hold off and discuss more about the mission and authority a little bit more if you wanted to.
Okay,
The
yeah.
membership qualifications seem to have been set.
Okay.
well, so I think, we're talking about the mission being broader, right? But by making it a parking advisory
Mhm.
committee. It's a committee, not a commission. It's going to be making recommendations to the parking authority.
Mhm.
The,
Recommendations about fees, uses, and events, or,
well, I would say
Impacts.
management of our
okay.
parking facilities, right?
That's a good word. I like that.
All of our parking facilities. Exclusive of parks, right? Right, because we wouldn't want to count.
That's currently not part of the parking authority. Has it been? That, any parking in parks? Parking inside parks, like the community park on Campbell?
well, it could fall under the jurisdiction of the parking authority. It
Right.
does, it's city parking, but the downtown parking advisory, I imagine they have to discuss parking in parking lots. Yeah, because cities,
In parks?
parking lots.
Well, what's interesting, so it's interesting, the
Yeah.
reason I
Huh.
bring this up
That's an interesting thought, yeah.
is because the parking inside parks is within the Parks Department, not Public Works.
That's true. All right, so I would exclude parks. You're right. Wait,
The parking authority can change this. If the parking authority
Yeah.
wants to get into parks, I don't know that the parking authority is gonna get into parks. I'd be really wary of having a committee that has more than one department that
Yeah.
they're dealing with.
yeah, yeah,
Right.
I'm with you on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, Sergio, do you have a comment?
yeah.
Historically, we've managed standalone parking lots.
Yeah.
If the parking lot is connected to a facility, whether it be a parks facility or
Uh-huh.
facility like City Hall, then it kind of rolls into another department or division. Like here at City Hall, we're getting facilities, that group. Parks specifically, and then park staff, and we support, the best we can those other lots, but why not manage them?
I like what you just said on standalone parking lots and or streets is what I would probably say, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
And so also, we're not talking about like the police department parking lot, right? Or
Right.
those things, right? So
yeah,
the public parking facilities exclusive of parks. And so make recommendations to the parking authority regarding management, public parking lots. We'll do first with lots exclusive, excluding parks. Management of street parking.
it's only excluding parks though, but it would be managing street parking.
But yeah, these are a couple things.
Yeah, yeah,
right? These
is
are
good.
management of parking lots, management of street parking. Um,
Should that be standalone lots?
yeah, sure. Standalone public parking lots.
Not associated with the facility.
Right. We'll
Yeah.
just say standalone,
Okay,
excluding parks, management of street parking. Do we want the parking advisory committee? Do we want all meter increases going through them or going straight to the authority?
well, it comes down to vetting it and getting input. I
So
think
you
it
want
has to
them
be-
to make recommendations regarding paid
I
parking
think they-
costs?
I think they would want to weigh in as opposed to just provide cover.
Okay,
Okay,
okay.
or not.
Paid parking locations and costs? Right?
Yes, yeah. Locations and costs and timeframes for paid.
Right.
You must have something, sorry, you must have something like that already written up. Is
Well,
that
would
part
it
of
be
this?
helpful to read out the duties?
Yeah, let's
Yeah.
read it.
Current
Yeah,
ones?
please.
They're listed in fours.
Okay,
So
Bert, good to
the-
see you.
the DPAC shall have
Thank
the
you, Mia.
power, and it shall be its duty to A, consider and make recommendations on issues or questions relating to downtown parking. B, assist, advise, and make recommendations to the city council, planning commission, and staff upon request of those bodies and persons, so catch-all. C, advise on parking management strategies and programs in the downtown parking district area. And then D, review and make advisory recommendations regarding management, maintenance, and operations of the downtown parking district, including such matters as maintenance, operating and capital budgets, hours of operation, parking pricing policies, valet programs, and employee commuter parking policies. So I'll leave that open for
Okay,
you.
yeah, yeah, it was good. I think that was pretty inclusive.
Mm-hmm,
Imagine that, it was already done.
mm-hmm.
All right, So
So take those and just broaden them to citywide.
broaden them to citywide. That's exactly
Yeah.
what I would hope a motion would be made to have.
Citywide exclusive of parks.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, the downtown parking by this, doesn't have any parks with parking.
Any part, no, not that, no. Plaza Park doesn't, Mission Park doesn't, only two parks. Right? No, there's the museum part,
Mission Park,
I mean, does it?
right next to the clock tower.
Yeah, is that,
Lot
is
there.
that a-
is-
it's considered Mission Park.
but is it really a park? I just think of it as a
But I
downtown.
think,
Yeah.
I think we've all just
Yeah.
referred to it as a standalone lot.
That's how I would too. There's the East Park there, next to the Mission.
Yeah, but it's not like a separate
Yeah,
parking lot. So B is, assist, advise, and make recommendations to the city council, planning commission. So the parking authority has to be added to that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and just remove, references about the downtown parking district. Downtown parking.
does that all sound like exactly what we're?
Yeah. And I don't know if you need more clarification.
No, I was just gonna add as well, just for clarity
Yeah.
purposes, the parking authority is essentially, if this committee is making recommendation to them, just so we're clear on what the parking authorities is, they're more like a financing authority body.
Yeah.
So their only charge by resolution is to report to council revenues and expenditures of parking in the city. And so just provide that and, to provide clarity on what this committee might be making recommendations to
Oh,
the
got
parking
it.
authority, for example, and what those recommendations might look like to city council. So the parking authority is really just kind of interested on actual revenues and expenditures.
Got it.
Reporting and auditing functions that report to council. So this committee is just for clarity purposes.
That's good to know. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that broadening it up is clear for us, Derek. you need any
Yeah,
further clarity?
it's clear, if I may.
Yeah.
Mr. Alberon, were you able to connect with, Mr. Hereford?
I don't think he's coming. I just saw
Okay.
his bubble turned to red, so
Okay.
I will say, in some talks with him, he has expressed some concern about it not being downtown anymore. So I just want to put that out there, that there might be a little pushback from possibly.
from the committee or from Jeff.
He,
Well,
Just
from
an
staff,
interest in a
potentially,
specific downtown representation.
they might ask clarifying questions or request this to come back to bring some more information to light or to alter some things slightly. I hope I just want to make sure that's.
When you say not being, go ahead. No, when you say not being downtown, not being,
I think Mr.
Downtown?
Hereford expressed like some, he felt that there was good reasons for there to be a downtown specific authority or a downtown specific committee. So I don't know, he didn't expand on that and I don't know all the ins and outs, but I do want to make sure that you're aware of that.
good to know.
well, and I think we have that covered by just limiting it to within paid parking facilities.
I think,
Quarter mile.
Right now, that's just downtown, but it makes sense as we go to Spinnaker or someplace else
great call.
Yeah.
Right.
Cool.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a motion, yeah?
And I'll second that motion. Yeah. Oh, does that motion include the changes we had on the membership?
Yeah, so this,
Yes.
Got it.
Jared, if you don't mind, if you want.
So we currently have two users representing city in general. That will stay the same.
Mhm.
We'll have the one user that was the one member who was nominated by a downtown organization will now be a nonprofit community organization
Okay.
nominee.
Mhm.
And then the other four members will be those who are a quarter mile from current paid parking.
And that'd be commercial property owner.
As a resident, as a
And
business, as a property owner,
And so
Anybody.
that just for clarity, the first two residents are residents anywhere in the city.
anywhere in the city,
Got it.
which is currently the case.
Yep, yeah.
We'll keep
And then those 4 users who are a quarter of a mile, they're anybody. We don't need,
Residents, property owners, business owners.
Correct.
but we shouldn't need to specify that if it's anybody.
Well, I mean,
We might keep.
we should specify it because, you know, I have no interest within a quarter mile of paid parking. I guess, well, that's not true. I
You're a
work
resident.
downtown.
Part, yeah.
I don't know if somebody working downtown qualifies. I would say, and so I think we do want the language.
Yeah,
Right,
and I think
I
you
agree.
take the current language that exists and just change it to say a quarter mile.
yeah,
Is that right?
yeah, a business owner, operator, manager, the owner of a commercial property or a resident.
Yep, within a quarter mile.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Because I don't think an employee that works downtown should count.
I don't either. But that person that works downtown could be one of the other 2 positions that we open.
Well, if somebody's a manager of a business, then absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, they should qualify. But I don't think I qualify just because I work at City Hall.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
All right, so that's the motion on the floor, and all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, see none. Oh, yeah, it's okay, motion passes. Sorry.
The puzzle look for Mr. McDonald.
Just for next steps, we'll package, both of these items together when we come back to council with both of these recommendations.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay.
The final one is item number 1. And item number 1 was, specific city council protocols. And,
Mhm.
sorry, I got it from my sheet. Okay,
So we have a number of issues.
yeah, number,
That's the license.
Essentially, it's essentially a catch-all.
Yeah. Yeah.
To look at continuity over the years.
Yeah.
Of advisory groups and ensuring that it's not at the whim of each ARC. And an ARC doesn't have that many times to meet anyway, so it really is, it's not fair to anybody. So we are looking to have some continuity, have something in place that spans the different committees, and it's sort of open to how you want to interpret it.
mhm,
And this is probably something, maybe we need a little bit of work as we go forward. We're supposed to come back to council in July anyways, discussing council advisory groups in general.
So what we've done is outlined, as we first discussed with the committee, is we've outlined the areas in which we have run into challenges as it relates to protocols. So those areas are all highlighted in the staff report.
I see.
We're not suggesting that that be the only conversation we have, but that's a starting point from staff's perspective as to some of the challenges that we've had over the past several committees. Thank you.
So just going through the background analysis, the first is about how the planning commission's a little different. That's not an issue. That's not a place where you've had a problem.
It's not. Now, one reason why we highlight that is that we do have, and you hear me talk about this all the time, is inconsistency in process, right? Because we have, for example, planning commission who each individual set of council members appoints their planning commissioners. You may recall as well that council recently created a redistricting commission that will start after this election cycle, in which the council identified that they as well felt that a council assignment process similar to planning commission would be best advised for that type of a commission.
Redistricting?
Excuse me, not for redistricting, for charter review.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
charter.
yeah. So as part of the charter review discussion, council also discussed that potential process of appointing 7 council members, appoint each member. The reason why we bring this up in general is, again, we're looking at appointment processes across the board and best practices and determining what is the best path forward for how we can maintain and keep these seats filled. And how we actively engage both council and the commissions alternatively through the appointment process. And so we raise that as a potential consideration in general for how commissioners get appointed. And for example, in a prior agency that I had, for all commissions, they were just flatlined at 7 members. And each council member made an appointment to each one of those individual bodies and terms aligned with council members. So we include that as a potential option as a process that the city currently has for one of its commissions and potentially for a second commission. So we raise that as,
Hmm.
in general, what I would say is the clerk's office struggles with the recruitment process in general. And
Mhm.
both of you have served on our committee, so you know the inconsistency in meeting. Then we come with 32. I think we have applicants soon, and getting through 32
Mhm.
interviews and 1 or 2 meetings presents challenges. So just in general,
Interesting.
we're trying to take a step back and look at our recruitment
Mhm.
process as a whole.
Yeah.
And so we raise that appointment process as a potential discussion point.
I think this is an interesting thought.
It is, you know, I'm wary of rolling it out, let's say for Parks and Rec.
Yeah.
And the reason I'm wary about it is partly to do with the timing of the appointments recommendation committee meeting process having changed so that all of the decisions are made in public. If we then switch it over to
Oh,
council members at home get to make their phone calls and decide who gets to sit on Parks and Rec.
I know,
That's,
I know, that's
see what I'm saying?
ugly, yeah,
It feels like it's getting cliquish.
yeah. It becomes more about who you know,
Yeah,
who you're close to.
yeah. I will say, as a resident, I strongly opposed the change in the planning commission. Strongly opposed it. Now, if there's not I'm a council member and I get to pick one, I think it's awesome. And then I'm gonna be off council and I'm gonna be like, they should never be appointed. They should
But
never be. Now, I will say this, I don't know about your relationship
to,
with David, right?
yeah, I've known for years.
I don't, I see Mark all the time. We don't talk about planning
No.
commission.
We never talk about it either,
So-
just so you know.
So, yeah, so my impression is that it has worked out. My concern at the time was that the planning commissioners would act as proxies
Mhm.
for a council member.
I know,
And I haven't seen that happen.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's working. But, and when it comes to the charter review thing, that's when we're straight up, I think it makes sense for council to know the people pretty well before they go on.
Mhm.
Somebody that clearly has a
And then,
demonstrated proven knowledge of what's going on that maybe wouldn't show up on a resume,
mhm. And I
right?
think that's more, yeah, I think it's more about, being willing to and have a more in-depth knowledge of the issues that we're going to be
Yeah.
presented with on council. So,
Yeah.
but I would also agree with you on planning commission that, I purposely don't, see David as my proxy. I see him as an independent. I want him to be an independent thinker. Now, if he disagrees with me a lot, I may call him aside, say, you got to have breakfast to see why are you always ruling this way when I would do this, but that hasn't happened.
Mark and I disagree
You know.
on a lot of things, but
Yeah.
if you don't recall, that change in the planning commission happened when the planning commission had one too many 7-0 or 6-1 votes
Oh.
opposing a staff recommendation. And so this was the housing allocation management plan. This was the general plan refinement. There were a couple things where,
I didn't know.
yeah, and so when those things made it to planning commission and they felt very strongly that what they were being asked to approve was a very bad idea. We got in a position where the city staff had spent, well, in case, somebody worked on it almost full-time for a year on something. And then it died at the planning commission. Now, I will say this, that is not the planning commission's fault.
Yeah.
We are doing a better job with this. But when you look at something like the abortive general plan refinement, what you had not a quota, you had a minority of council members driving this process. And it became this huge deal. And it wouldn't have passed council either.
Yeah.
But you know, it's a real spectacle too, when you have the planning commission 7-0 voting against something that a couple council members did. And that was,
Yeah.
I thought that some of them were gonna be replaced and said they all were replaced. That's how we got the model that we have.
That was 4 years ago, 5 years ago.
2016, maybe,
Yeah, so 8 years ago, so. About,
2017?
I think 2018.
2018,
In the
okay.
2020 election. Yeah, it was
Well, no, because when I was elected,
appointments.
there had already been appointments,
So
yeah, so it's
2017
2017.
was the first.
okay,
Yeah,
I saw almost with districting in a way,
Yeah,
at the same time.
actually.
yeah.
Sounds about right.
Now, if you don't mind, I think we have one public comment. Is that correct?
Yeah, we can take public comment.
Maybe take public comment and we're continuing.
Sorry, I was just reading it.
Oh, okay. Did you want to say it instead?
I could, it's up to you as chair.
I'm fine with you speaking. It's good. I kind of skipped public comment.
Can I reference that?
Okay.
It's okay. So absorbing this and then listening to the other components,
Mm-hmm.
observation I've had from being on the water commission and then also sharing observations with DRC and planning commission. As a resident.
Mhm.
Planning commission is deemed a judicial body. Whereas staff does not view water commission as a judicial body.
Mhm.
Staff uses it more as a recommending body, a recommendation.
Right. Same parts. Yeah.
Okay, so then the question about the ability for virtual meetings for water commission
Mm.
comes into question because it's a recommending body and the facilities are not available in the community meeting. Okay, so that's one issue with the distinction between the judicial body and the non-judicial body,
I see.
between planning commission and water commission,
Good point.
even though there's a muni code. But then the other issue is how does the parking authority, how is that distinguished? Is it a judicial body or is it a recommendation body?
The parking advisory,
Committee?
Parking authority,
parking authority is the city
It's the
council.
City council.
it's the city council.
Yeah.
So those meetings are always available.
Yeah,
Televised virtual meeting.
We already do this every now and then as a redevelopment agency,
we did. Yeah.
where
Okay,
it's on the agenda and this is the council sitting as a redevelopment
We
agency.
changed hats.
but it's not the issue with the community meeting room.
No, it's all, when the council meets as a parking authority, it's just gonna be on a council agenda.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay, so, so then the issue comes up for me, looking at the planning commission, because the commission was a big topic. You may recall recently, not only with, and I always get confused if it's Hawaiian Village or Hawaiian Gardens.
Hawaiian Village.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It came up where there was a split vote by the DRC and the community development director advanced it to planning commission. And so how does that play into this?
Yeah.
And then lastly, I'm unsure of the right way to deliberate this, so I'll leave it to the wisdom of the ARC members.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you. Thanks.
well,
Mike.
yeah,
If I could just provide a response in regards to the meeting. So the planning commission operates very different than any other body because planning commission is the only commission required under state law for every jurisdiction in California. So every city has a planning commission under state law, which is a quasi judicial body. In addition to the planning commission, the city has approved advisory committees. All fall under the Brown Act. So as it relates to bodies created by the legislative body, they're all created by the legislative body. Planning commission operates slightly differently because state law. DRC, HPC were quasi judicial during streamlining, and those changes were made to the recommending bodies of HPC and DRC. So those changes were made by council, which means that those are now advisory bodies, as are all other, as we refer to them, council advisory groups,
Got it.
which fall under boards, commissions, and committees. They are all Brown Act bodies.
Okay.
What that means is, as it refers to virtual participation, the rules apply across the board for all of them, even a council member, for example. who does not meet one of the qualifications under AB 2449 and does not want to post their address on the agenda cannot participate remotely. Where we've had challenges
Mhm.
is in our room technology.
Right, that's
So
what-
for example, we have not been able to accommodate even under an emergency circumstance or a just clause under state law that allows virtual participation. Our technology has not allowed that, but Brown Act requirements don't change whether it's quasi judicial or non-quasi judicial, AKA advisory. Brown Act applies across the board to all those bodies.
But tell me this, are we not going to be modifying the, 4 conference rooms here?
Yeah.
To all have,
The good news is this room included, this room and all meeting rooms will be able to accommodate virtual meetings. I don't like to do date certains,
Right.
But what I'll say is, we've got our fingers crossed that by the time council comes back from their recess at the end of August, that the rooms are upgraded. Know how that actually works, but that's our goal. And yes, the goal is all meetings to be broadcast, to be recorded, and to allow for virtual participation. So right now, council in 2022 adopted a policy consideration that said final action bodies are hybrid. Final action bodies are planning commission, directors, hearing, and city council.
Mhm.
Hence why those 3 meetings are held in the city council chambers, broadcasted live and conducted over WebEx. That was a policy consideration adopted by council in 2022, and we could only accommodate final action bodies at that time. That's why we don't have it for all of our advisory meetings, but moving forward, that's been our goal, is to be able to accommodate a virtual participation when needed for all of our meeting bodies.
Excellent. So will we need to revise that, that policy then to, or just make it, just, as much as possible?
Should be- Yeah. Yeah, so that we can,
Yeah, okay, got it.
okay, so dealing with that first paragraph, I don't know of any other body where I would want it to be every council member appoints somebody. I can't think of one.
To see-
I like the special charter committee getting in.
I think I understand the burden and the
Yeah.
time burden of interviewing and getting applicants together. But I really think it would not add to building trust and open it up to the general public as the application process does currently.
I think about something like the mobile home review board, which is just a struggle. I mean,
Yeah.
honestly, if I were to appoint somebody, I could find somebody to appoint. But at the same time, if I wanted to find somebody and say, please apply, you'll get on,
Yeah.
do that too. But I don't.
Good point.
Okay, so I think we stick with how we've got it now, right?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
I would agree.
Okay, so then we have this next paragraph is the ARC, and the way it currently works is you serve 1 year and only 1 year.
Yeah.
And it's a 3-member body.
Yeah.
I like it the way it is. I don't want somebody spending extra time on the ARC. I think part of that is it can be powerful. It's a lot less powerful now that the planning commission is not
Yeah.
being set up by the ARC. But the other thing too is, it can be a real burden serving on the ARC.
Mhm.
And I think that burden needs to be shared. I think about when Measure O and they had 80 applicants. And I also think about a certain council meeting where we kind of put Liz Campos on a committee that she didn't want to serve on. And
I'll give it. Which one? Do you mind?
the Main Street Moves.
I
Yeah.
didn't realize.
She didn't want to be on it. And we overruled her and put her on it. And so I don't want a council member being kind
Yeah.
of browbeaten into serving on this committee. That's what I think.
Yeah, obviously, each one of us on the council have different interests in different things,
Yeah.
but I could see the ARC being one that it's choosing somebody to help make decisions for us or with us on City Hall.
Yeah.
So we should all have that opportunity to do that. So I don't see that as a browbeating on this one.
Well,
I
I'm
would-
just saying,
would on anything else.
I think if, you know, here's the thing, it would be so easy for a couple council members to say, I really don't want to serve on that committee. And so, Liz, you're going to be on the committee. And she says, no, I really don't. And we're like, no, Liz, it should be you.
There's been council members of recent who simply didn't want to be on any committees.
Yes,
And there's some
and
that
that's a problem.
were on the committee but never showed on the committee.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
We would hope that people that are being signed to do a task that's important to the city actually participate.
Well, and
engaged.
I will say, I was really hoping all three of us would be here,
I know.
but I think the ARC has to be able to meet with two people.
When I found out, I know it's for a really good reason though why she's not here. Something that we're all very thankful for.
Opportunity for sanctions.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
But so far it's working
It's-
well.
Yeah,
So-
I think I like the way the ARC works now. And also it, you know, it gives you sort of an idea as a council member for your 4-year term. Either you get put on it or you don't. And then you sort of have an idea, well, if I wasn't put on it this year, I'm gonna be on it next
That's
year.
right. Yeah,
And it's one where it takes away discretion of the mayor. And this is one where I think it's okay to, the mayor still has some discretion. The mayor could have been here. The mayor could have put himself on the committee instead of any of us three.
or you could have put, he still has the discretion to choose which three.
No, because the three that we're on, Bill and.
Oh, yeah, and then the next.
They
three.
can't do it.
Right.
They
right,
can't do
They've
it.
already done it.
So there's always a pool of
yes.
4.
Yeah.
And he has to pick 3 of the 4.
Got it.
And I think that's good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Okay. So incumbents applying for an additional term. Past ARCs have gone back and forth on incumbents and whether they need to interview or not.
Can I interject
Oh, yeah.
real quick?
Yes.
Just want to note that it is 2:30. We have the room. Feel free to extend it if you like, but we probably don't want to go too far.
Okay,
But
I think
feel
this
free
is
to-
pretty
Okay.
quick from here on out. I
Yeah.
went through that.
sort of.
we certainly
Except
don't
for-
need to,
yeah.
Right.
I didn't expect any final decisions about this item
Okay.
in particular, so we could always move it to.
I think, and I know it's extra work for the clerk's office. I think ARC should be always interviewing in some sort. Because we come back to what an interview looks like down on the bottom of the page.
Mhm.
In part because, you know, I'm gonna be gone, somebody's gonna replace me, they're gonna be serving on ARC. They may have not have ever met the person that is up for renewal. And we just saw this with the housing authority. There were some people up for renewal. I hadn't met them before. And so, I think incumbents need to interview. But is that true even if there's nobody else applying?
I would say no.
Would say no. See that? I thought you would say that.
I think it's the opportunity to update us. Well, that'd be the,
Well, you know what? I think we can come back to it when we get to,
Okay.
when we get to the bottom question, because I think depending on what we do at the bottom one. Okay. The ARC has 2 recruitment periods a year. The unscheduled vacancies don't fit within the sort of planning of recruitment periods. Can you explain that a little better?
Yeah, so this is where we run into the challenges again, where in setting the regular meeting schedule, we used to be on a track of June and November. And we've heard some feedback from the community that these meetings are always special meetings. And that the lead up to the meetings isn't always exactly the same amount of time as others. The challenge that we've had in general is these unscheduled vacancies. Right, and so it goes back to the same question around terms. Do we allow a rolling basis of applications? Do we only allow applications when there's a vacancy, for example? Are we then, every unscheduled vacancy, going back out to a 30-day recruitment and then scheduling special meetings just for that? We've really tried to work to figure out how we might figure out how we can get on some kind of a regular meeting schedule.
I know.
And that's been really challenging for us. And so, you know, we've looked at, again, the way that the terms end, the way that the terms start, kind of how we navigate these unscheduled vacancies. And so what we're basically coming to this committee is a brainstorm on how we might figure out how we get ourselves to some kind of a regular schedule. Now, sometimes there's challenges of meeting quorum where you want to speed up, for example, a recruitment process and an interview process. Because like what we saw with recently with Measure O, they had quorum challenges, so they couldn't conduct business
Right.
unless we went through and did interviews. That's not generally the case. And what our general rule of thumb is when someone's term expires, for example, we will reach out to them and ask them if they're willing to continue until an appointment is made.
Mhm.
And so we're trying to look at a process by which we can normalize or set some kind of a meeting schedule. That might mean that we agree to leave some seats vacant for a 3-month period if we set a quarterly meeting schedule, for example,
This one.
or kind of looking at in general. What Derek and I have considered is just doing open and rolling recruitments, meaning we will accept an application at any time and we will keep your application on file. And when a vacancy opens up, we will pull from the file of applications that we have. We have what's called the MATI Act, which is the state law that dictates the noticing requirements for these types of boards, commissions, and committees. It's a very broad piece of law, like others are. What it says is an unscheduled vacancy, we have to post it within a certain time period, and we can't fill the vacancy within a certain time period. Other than that, the MATI Act doesn't dictate, for example, how long we do recruitment. Do we open it for 30 days? Do we open it for 60 days? When do we accept applications? When do we not accept applications? And so it's been difficult for us to try to standardize this meeting body, just given that, right? There are some people, an unexpected vacancy occurs and the staff will come to us and say, we need it filled immediately by our next meeting. Not because of quorum, just because staff wants to operate with full commission.
Yeah.
Right, and so just kind of looking at the sheer number of unscheduled vacancies that we've had over the course of the past 2 years has presented us with challenges. So that's kind of what we mean in regards to the organization of the ARC meetings.
And I'll just add that we really want to be mindful that these are volunteer positions.
Right.
That people are giving their time, their efforts, I mean, sometimes a lot of time to review these applications. So we really want it to be, and then there's requirements for ethics training, for all those other filings. So we really want to make it as painless as possible, especially at the onset so that these interviews aren't, sometimes we have to have them at 3 o'clock and sometimes we give them 2 weeks notice. We'd really like to give them multiple weeks notice and then have it be at a time or a way which is favorable to their schedule as best we can manage. I mean, within the constraints we exist. But.
So for example, do we set a quarterly meeting schedule and there's a standing item on the agenda, unscheduled vacancies, and that's when they get dealt with, as opposed to scheduling a special meeting in between? Do we allow on a rolling basis, recruitment periods, kind of things like that?
Well, I would like, before we do that, to just get to the 2 bottom questions of hybrid participation and interview questions and availability, because this, I think if you and I come to an agreement on what we would like to see with that, that would help with this part.
I think you're right.
And so one of them is the hybrid participation. Are we okay allowing people to do the interview remotely?
I am.
Okay. And so what we would be talking about is recommending to council as part of ARC protocols, a separate, defined ARC protocols includes that people can interview remotely.
Correct. Yeah.
And,
Okay.
And so, okay, that was easy.
Yeah, no, that was very effective through COVID. I mean, I don't feel you could form relationships
Right.
over remotely.
Right.
But you could get a real good feel for somebody, have questions answered, and have them share the most important valid points, So, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And so then the second part of this, which is the question availability. And we've been on the ARC and we haven't written questions.
Yeah, I know.
And then we were gone and the next ARC wanted to write specific questions and wanted to kind of spring them on people.
Oh.
Now, my thing as a teacher is you don't do that. Because we've seen it where somebody can come in and we see it at council when somebody is nervous. what you're looking at is that you're looking at a nervous person.
And how well they do testing.
And it's like, that's not actually what we're trying to assess.
Yeah.
Right? I would like us, and the ARC can go ahead and devise questions, but I would like us to share the questions in advance.
Mhm.
And I think that's also fair, because since they're open and everybody comes in, whoever is the last person
Yeah.
has heard all the questions, has heard a bunch of answers,
Yeah, I know.
right?
Yeah, so they've already gotten that,
Okay,
they've gotten that unfair advantage of knowing what no one else seems to know.
right. The first person walking in hasn't heard the questions.
Yeah.
Everybody else has.
I think the key then, if I knew that everyone had the questions now as an applicant,
Yeah.
is making sure that you were very clearly identifying what distinguishes you as a candidate
Right,
than other people.
right,
So I would be more focused on answering that
right.
than I would be on how fast can I put together a thought process to answer that question thoroughly.
So then, this brings us, so
Yeah.
we're like, we will publish we'll publish the question. This would be part of the ARC protocols.
I think that's right. Now, if they come and read their statements to us, I might have a little bit of.
Well, but here's the next question. Here's the question, right? So then they have that.
Yeah.
When we do the interview, we ask those questions, right? Because it's the same questions.
Mhm.
And they might have prepared their answers because they just get nervous speaking.
It's okay, but I mean, I think we'll be able to recognize that
Yeah,
if that's, versus someone else creating the answers for them.
right.
But I can't imagine when somebody would do that, but
Well,
that's where.
I will tell you, as somebody who has helped talk to people who have interviewed for commissions,
Yeah,
committees, I said, well, I don't know exactly what they're gonna ask you, but I can tell you what they're gonna ask you.
I know.
Right?
Yeah.
It's pretty obvious what they're gonna ask you. And so we have that. Then how about this? So can somebody then, we publish the questions in advance, can somebody write the answers and do that instead of an interview? Or do we still require them to come in? Or be on
That's a good
TV?
question because,
Which, just to add,
Yeah.
we've had that as well with the prior committee,
Yeah.
allow the submission of a written statement.
and I would allow that, but I think if I was the applicant, there's value in first, the best thing is they're here in person.
Right.
The next best thing is they're there. And the third best thing is they simply answer their questions and send them in. So if you really want that position, you have a shot at it still. But there may be some people that did the other two that formed a little bit more, a stronger opinion by somebody on ARC. That's what I would-
So the reason I say this too is because it's
But-
going to be difficult for you to try to schedule interviews if then you've got 3 of your applicants who are saying, I can't be there on
Yeah.
Tuesday.
Yeah.
Right? Then do you,
I'll say it will be easier with hybrid. That
Hybrid.
will help considerably. It is only once in a while that we have someone say, hey, I'm on vacation for those 3 weeks. Can I please submit my answers in writing? And
okay,
we've accepted them at one point and then another art committee decided not to. So
But I think where you're headed is we allow all 3.
okay.
That's where I would go.
I would too.
It gives somebody that does travel a lot. The only thing, it would also tell me though, if they do it in writing, that one of the things would be, are they going to be available for the meetings?
Well,
Probably go through my mind.
it could be something where you can do it only in writing if you're renewing a term.
Oh.
But if you're new,
I think even new, I would allow it. I would allow it, but it probably would, it would wait on me.
it would.
It would still,
Yeah.
but this person came out so significantly like, wow, this is really unbelievable. I'm so glad they took the time to write it. I can't wait to, I'll probably maybe want to meet with that person unless they're so head or heels higher, better off
Right.
than other candidates. It's like, no, this is the one for sure.
Because we had this issue, and I don't know if you recall.
Hmm.
I don't remember what committee it was, where it was the on the port commission, remember? And
Oh, yeah,
did the interview,
yeah.
and he couldn't be there and he was like traveling or something.
Yep.
So, I mean, that does come up.
Yeah.
Well, and another thing to add to that is with the unscheduled vacancies, what we found is, for example, the need to schedule fast. So then we're working with 3 council members because we don't have any standard timelines.
Right.
And then the only date that works is, 7 days from now. And now we have a 7-day notification to candidates that the interviews are at this day and time. Where sometimes when in a normal recruitment process that's been open for 60 days, we've already worked with ARC, we've already set a date. Well, now you've been given 30-day notice of when your interview is, as opposed to a 7-day notice.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah.
It's because we don't have kind of these standard timelines in place where we're also working with scheduling 3 council members.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
a standardization of a schedule and process could really help us in that regard so that we are standardizing the notification to the applicants. as
Love
well.
it.
So,
Okay.
so what I would suggest for the interview questions is the questions are published in advance. And
Hmm.
participants, we already said they can participate remotely. I would say participants can also submit their answers in writing or record a video of themselves answering the questions,
I actually love that.
right? Do you want to say that instead of submit answers in writing? There's a technology issue.
Yeah, you know what it is for me? I think you get a feel for somebody on how, regardless of opinion or viewpoint they may offer.
Yeah.
Is how they work with other people,
Right.
you know, and are they gonna be effective? Like, we have known examples of that, you know, where the person may be extremely intelligent, but are they gonna be able to work with other people? And I
Well,
see
you know,
one of our committees.
here's the thing. Right? Orchestras used to be like 95% male.
Right.
And when they started making the auditions happen behind a screen, that's when they started putting women in orchestras.
Oh.
And so now we're at a point where it's pretty much evenly balanced because now the auditions happen behind a screen. And in the orchestras where they don't use the screen, guess what happens? Where they stop using the screen, they go back to putting men in the orchestra.
Hmm.
So there's a thing too, which is somebody can just be very charming and look the part,
Mhm,
and you can be kind of snowed,
mhm.
and you can be like Alex Mack. Man, this guy's great.
That's kind of the whole thing with
Right.
boys, for instance,
Right.
on TV, you know,
Right.
their backs to the singer, so they don't
Right.
get
Yes.
dissuaded by
Yeah.
their appearance.
Yeah. Anyhow, would you feel okay saying you can't just submit it in writing? It's got to be, if you're not going to be there, you can participate in person, you can participate hybrid, or you can record a video.
Yeah,
I think we're giving a lot of options there.
I like that. I'm fine with all 4 of
Okay.
those. Yeah.
Since they're pretty standard questions, I think, yeah. Okay.
And I think, Michael, is it normal then for the clerk to have the questions prepared like what you guys did for the one?
I'll let Derek answer that.
Okay.
So
Sorry.
those were put together, I think with the previous ARC, we were also asking the same questions about continuity and questions that come up as a particular pain point. So they recommended that we go out and use staff. We did have a couple options of
Oh,
how to
yeah.
come up with the questions, and they decided that clerk's office with other staff in the city would work on those questions and then come back to ARC and they approved them. I don't remember there being any changes.
No, the ARC committee had directed us to work with the commissions, the staff, and the staff of the commissions work with the commissioners themselves. And
Love
so each commission had an opportunity to identify questions that they then presented to staff, and then staff then presented them to the clerk's office, and then the clerk's office presented them to ARC. And then ARC picked and chose which questions they would ask. It was almost in the original preference was to kind of do that at the start of each, right? We're gonna have these interviews today. Let's approve the questions at the start of the meeting, because we had, in some instances, more questions that could be asked.
Yep,
Than the
yeah.
time allocated. And so it was almost like they were approving questions in advance, at times, but that's where the current list of questions came from, kind of input from across the 3 different
That makes sense.
areas.
Okay.
Okay.
Good.
I don't feel like I need to decide what the questions are gonna be.
No, I think, because even like last time we were able to modify and say, you know, and add to or subtract, right?
Yeah. Yeah, well,
but I want staff's input. and
Yeah,
that's what-
yeah. But what we can do is, if you want to do that, then we would need to build into an ARC meeting, what the questions would be, because we should do that ahead of time since we're publishing the questions ahead of
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, so land on the final set of questions to be asked.
Yeah,
Maybe when if we do set a standard schedule for ARC, then maybe at the end of each meeting, these will be coming up next time, compare with any questions that you particularly may want to ask.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for next steps for us right now, if we continue the conversation, what we can do at the next ARC meeting is bring all of the questions that have been asked over the past 2 years, for example, and see if the committee might want to finalize those 10 questions, and moving forward, those are our questions.
or we could write in the ARC protocol that the ARC members can write to the city clerk with recommendations for questions to be included. And that just.
And
that's where
just right
it's
there on-
entered, and the clerk can consider them and working with the staff. No, we could do that too.
I like that too. That's probably because we're not going to probably discuss them.
I
I mean, we're probably going to look at them. So we all decided the same 90% of them.
think so. I would say that we would, but specifically say in the ARC protocols that,
I think, given the dynamics of things around us, is that as long as there's that avenue, that opening, that there's something that wasn't thought of because this dynamic didn't exist.
Right.
And it's glaring, then we
Right.
have to have the ability to add that
right.
before you, but I think we have that, right? Yeah. So, yeah, but I
Yes.
think,
You have the authority for us.
okay.
Yeah.
So it sounds like yes to hybrid participation, yes to providing interview questions in advance and including language that allows for the opportunity for ARC members to submit recommendations for questions as well.
Yes,
Okay.
but also yes to, the pre-recorded questions, they can record a video, a
Yeah.
cell phone video
Yeah.
or something.
Love that.
And to clarify that, the submission of recording, that's not like if you don't meet A and B, here's like another option, an internal procedure. Here are 3 options that we present to you.
We could say strong, well,
Because if they are able to attend in person but would choose to pre-record a video, does the committee want to rate those in terms of preference? Our preference would be to appear in person. The second option would be hybrid, and if you're not able to appear in person or hybrid, you can pre-record a video.
That's exactly,
Is that?
yeah,
that's fine.
Yeah.
I would do that. But because it's obvious to us, I think, but to some
Right.
people, it may not be obvious that
right.
they innately have, especially if they're presentable, maybe if they're not real good at presenting themselves, they'd do better on paper.
Yeah, or you
Right.
might find yourself with everyone submitting pre-recorded videos, for example, because you remove the nervousness of a face.
That's right.
And attending in person.
I don't think that would be terrible, to be frank.
No, I don't really either.
I don't. I mean, what you're talking about there is lowering the barrier.
Yeah.
To get more people.
Yeah, yeah,
So
I like-
don't think that's terrible.
I don't either. Yeah.
Um,
So
Yeah.
I think any of those is fine, but we could say, I think
So any with no preference, then.
any with no preference.
here's the thing, we're gonna take that to council and council's gonna put a preference on it.
I know, but I
But-
think though, especially since we're talking about adults.
Yeah.
Okay, you kind of know if you're better in person or if you're better on paper or, and you want to put your best foot forward if you really want to do that. So it just gives people a chance to put their best foot forward.
Okay, so then we get to, and this is another issue, recording of meetings.
Yeah.
Because let's say somebody does the video recording and then they should be able to give it to the clerk's office 24 hours in advance. right?
Yeah.
So let's just say 24 hours in advance, 48 hours,
I think-
48 hours?
I think 24 hours.
Because you
is
need
fine.
time to make sure it works.
The one obvious question that's goes through my mind is, so suspect the recording's not in English. Are we then, how are we handling, have we had a situation where we needed to have a translator?
So we currently, it's a good question, so I appreciate that.
Yeah.
We currently, our applications are in English. Requests have been made to have our applications not in English. And it's something that we are moving forward to the direction of having more language access. However, right now, the official language of business is in English. And so the expectation would be right now that a commissioner participate using English. Now, that doesn't mean in the future, we don't have the ability to use technology that allows for interpretation at city council meeting or at these board commission and committee meetings. It's definitely a direction as we look at language access in general that we're moving towards.
Mhm.
But right now, we don't have the capacity
Yeah.
to support a non-English speaker, for example, in one of our council advisory groups.
I bet sometime in the near future it will be, though, that's my guess.
Okay, so then my question with the recording of meetings, if somebody is submitting a video, how is that going to, what are we doing with recording of meetings? We're doing, we have a video recording going?
This meeting, for example, is being recorded. And so one of the questions that have come up in general is the recording, because of the aspect of interviews.
Yes.
In the past, the preference has been to not record the ARC meetings because their folks are coming and interviewing.
Right.
And they might feel uncomfortable to know that their employer, for example, is going to watch that interview. So there's been a preference to not have those meetings recorded. What I'll also know is the prior city attorney and prior city clerk, they process the deliberation on the ARC committee different than our now prior city attorney and my. So two prior city attorneys ago, and now our most recent prior city attorney.
Just use names.
We made the interpretation that the deliberation could not take place in closed session because it didn't meet the requirements of the Brown Act or personnel matters, which can be discussed in closed session. So the shift happened in 2022 where the ARC deliberation was now happening in front of the applicants. And it made sometimes ARC members uncomfortable, staff uncomfortable, and applicants uncomfortable. But we don't really find an exception in the Brown Act that allows us to not do that in an open and public setting.
Oh, yeah.
So then the question comes, do we record it and make the video available on the website? As is the direction that we're recording all meetings moving forward. These are public meetings, but we would pose that question to staff if there is a sensitivity around folks interviewing. From a staff perspective in the clerk's office, our recommendation would be to record and have the recordings available. But we would defer to the committee if there's a different preference.
So, and there is no legal requirement to
Yeah,
record the meeting.
Yeah.
There is a requirement that it be open. One of the things I come up with on this is then, because if we are going to allow people to submit their things on video, we're just doing everything, then they need to be told that it will be part of the public record.
Right. That I would agree.
Yeah, and we do have a quote unquote, what to expect document that we provide to our applicants where we share with them their open and public meetings, deliberation takes place, for example. So we would ensure that those folks as well participating via video would know that, but we do share since that change with folks that this is an open and public meeting and public comment and.
And I will say, I feel a whole lot better about, because I know at our last time, there was somebody that didn't want to be recorded for their interview. I feel a lot better about saying, no, we record all the interviews when we're giving them the questions in advance
I know.
and we're giving them
I agree.
options on how to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
They can do 15 takes on their cell phone.
Yeah.
And some will.
I know.
Some are gonna put so much more work into a cell phone video than just walking in.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that. I mean, I guess the term of what I think of is catching people off guard, knowing it's being recorded.
Yeah.
It's a different story a bit to me because that person may be too inhibited to
Right.
want to participate, not knowing if they're going to totally flub this, make a mess of them or not, So I wouldn't want to inhibit them. I want them to be as comfortable as they can to actually do the work at hand.
So, okay, so we record everything, including the interviews. Do those get posted on the YouTube site or not? I know what we have now. I'm asking you, do we, or do we just maintain them in case somebody requests them?
I think I personally probably would maintain them.
Just not put them on YouTube?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think if somebody wanted them, they'd ask for them, and I think if I was the candidate, and I couldn't be there in person, I sent something in, I may want to listen to them. I may ask for that recording.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm kind of like 40-60 on that.
Yeah. What are your thoughts?
In general, I would say if you have a recording, publish it.
Yeah.
But I can understand there's, as you noted, there's no requirement. If we do record it to post it to YouTube or to the web, it would be available upon request, so we'd be meeting our legal requirements.
Yeah.
I'm of the opinion that all open and public meetings should be
Are open.
recorded and be open and provided on the
I
website.
hear it.
But I understand the sensitivity around folks interviewing, right? And again, they're interviewing for a
Yeah.
public official, a public position, where they're gonna be in open and public meetings regularly. And I think that is scary for folks at times, thinking that they transition to a quote unquote public official. So I could understand the sensitivity around that interviewing, as you noted. Oh, what happens if I completely bomb it? Now my
Yeah.
employer can access it. But at the end of the day, in the spirit of openness and transparency, if it's an open and public meeting, then I would make a recommendation that it be publicly available.
Yeah.
I think the other thing about that is if they're available on YouTube,
Mhm.
I would wager that most of the people that watch an ARC meeting are people that are thinking about applying to a committee or a commission, and they're doing their homework and they want to get an idea what those meetings look like.
That's a good idea. That's really good. I guess what immediately went through my mind is the abuse of stuff that's recorded, but people who want to abuse the stuff that's recorded will abuse, they would be the ones asking for it.
Well, and they're the ones that want to be appointed to a city, an
Yeah.
official city body, and have their name on the, as a
I'm
committee.
fine with it being
Yeah.
on YouTube.
Okay, so now that we've made it a lot easier for people to apply and do hybrid.
Mhm.
Okay, so now we can talk a little bit, right? We don't have much time about the, do we try to stick to 2 recruitment periods a year, 4 recruitment periods a year?
I think what our recommendation from the staff perspective and what we attempted to do with the last committee, we weren't successful with it, but what we attempted to do was set a quarterly schedule. And I think that if we were to set a quarterly schedule, we could cancel if
Mhm.
there are no recruitments.
Yeah,
And so it looks like Derek might have a differing opinion than me, so I'll let him have some input as he's really been the one navigating this.
Well, no, not necessarily. It is just difficult because some of the commissions, something will be coming up like water rates, like came to the Water Commission recently. And if they really want a full membership.
Yeah.
And if there's not, there is that rush. And so if you have 2 positions that you're waiting to fill till a certain date, the quarterly date, could prove a little difficult. But we could always do special meetings. I mean, there's ways around it. I think we want to ideally something clean.
Mhm.
Something clean where ARC and staff can execute some executive decisions over some things, but overall have things be fairly clear. So that we're not constantly making, okay, well, this is an exception, this is an
Yeah.
exception, this is an exception. We try to do the most to catch everything.
I think at the quarterly rate as well, you think in general, an unexpected vacancy happens. But our preference would be to do recruitment for at least 30 days,
Mhm.
right? So now you've been given the notice, you're gonna do 30 days. There's some time for the intake, the scheduling and whatnot. So I think at a quarterly rate, if you had an unscheduled vacancy today, for example, and we knew that the meeting of our next quarterly meeting and it was longer than 30 days, we could easily just tell all applicants, staff and everyone, this appointment will happen on this date.
Right.
If it's less than 30 days, it goes to the next quarter. That might
Yeah.
present us with some challenges
Uh-huh.
because then you might find a vacancy for 40, for 60 days, in that instance, for example. But what would be nice is if we could go, hey, recruitments that we're doing today, the next available meeting is this day. That's when you can expect for your interviews to take place.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
It would be nice if we could do that. And then we will always eventually need to schedule special meetings, cancel meetings, adjust meeting dates. But if in general, we had something to look at and just go, today you announced your resignation, hey, staff,
Mhm.
the next available appointment date is this date.
Right.
And that's when the appointment will take.
So we're
place.
quibbling over that 60-day difference between the 30-day and the 90-day.
Yeah,
Do
so-
quarterly. I'd like to hear it, George. Go ahead.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
So specific to my resignation from the Water Commission, although it was unscheduled, I intentionally timed it so that my resignation fell within the window of the next ARC meeting to recruit the other position, which was in between my last meeting, my resignation, the ARC committee, the appointment of a new commissioner, and then the next scheduled meeting for
Got
ARC commission.
it. Okay.
So just my opinion,
Mhm.
having gone through this process as unscheduled, my intention was not to disrupt the flow of the commission.
Mhm.
And so going back to the quarterly, if these unscheduled meetings, unscheduled vacancies happen, you will probably find that if there's a quarterly
Mhm.
review, then you would probably have less disruption to the committees.
Okay.
Can I also bring up one other point
Mhm.
very quickly?
Please.
Michael mentioned, the state clerk mentioned earlier, we have 32 applicants coming up. That's not really, you don't want to do a marathon of 32 applicants, even with the new changes, maybe there'll be more recordings.
Yeah.
It's just a lot to go through and a lot to ask of yourselves. So,
Is that for real? We have 32 coming up?
Currently, and recruitment is still open.
well, because we,
It's the Mobile Home Rent Review Board.
No.
it's because, well,
Get me going.
this is also something that the subcommittee can have a say on if you want. I take it that those who haven't been appointed, because sometimes you get really good applicants and there's
Yeah.
only one position and they're like, oh, I wish we could appoint more. I go back to applicants who haven't been selected over the past year. I don't do it in all history. And then say, hey, we have this position opening up. Are you still interested? We have your application on file. If you respond, let me know. We can put your application above.
Mhm.
So, and that's where you get that can lead to getting to more applicants
Mhm.
for popular
Mhm.
advisory groups like arts and culture and other things.
And accepting on a rolling basis. It's just, if we could just accept applications at all the time, an unscheduled vacancy happens. We post for 10 days, which is what our requirement is under the law.
Yeah.
And then we pull the applicants that are already on file, and anyone that came in that 10 days, we have a date assigned and we move right into the next process.
It could mean that a quarterly basis, there might need to be 2 meetings, to split up
Yeah.
Yeah,
the number.
Have you done it that way where you worked before?
rolling basis.
Yeah.
Yeah, and actually Derek and I have been, for example, in the current recruitment, Derek carried over the applications from the last recruitment, reached out to them if they're still interested, and we kept their applications on file.
How long do you keep them in sort of
I think we've decided maybe a year.
hibernation? Yeah.
There is not a set.
We haven't said anything, but I think it could make sense to.
Basically what I've been doing is if someone wasn't appointed, and then I go back to them and they say, no, I'm not really that interested.
Yeah.
Then I take them out of the,
Well, yeah.
or if they don't respond,
Mhm.
they have like that one-time opportunity and then it's reapply.
Well, yeah, so, I mean, so if we end up have back-to-back meetings over a 2-week period or something, to handle all the applicants. And that's for a meeting, only meeting quarterly, for the most part.
Mhm.
That's not the end of the world.
No, and again, I think that just happens. Sometimes you have ARCs that put in a whole lot of work.
Yeah.
I like the idea of quarterly. I like the idea of the quarterly schedule. I think that we've made some changes that will make it a whole lot easier for when there is an unscheduled vacancy and there has to be a special thing.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think one other thought too, it just reminded me of when you go into jury duty and the judge tells you how important this is to the process of democracy. As long as people understand that, maybe they're just reminded, like what you were saying, George, is that, because you knew that, is that how important this is to help us serve our community, and that we're actively seeking. I mean, it's just a one paragraph talking to someone when they first thanking them for their time and sharing with them how important it is that you do what you say you're going to do and try to participate as much as you can, because
Right.
it's important for our process.
So ARC protocols, should it include language that the clerk's office can do 10-day appointments if they have applications on file? Do you want language in ARC protocols that,
I think that's probably covered under the Matty Act.
okay,
Is it?
Yeah,
Okay.
okay.
yeah, I think that's probably, and the only clarifying language I would say is that if the committee agrees that we can accept applications on a rolling basis.
Okay.
So, right now, we only put the word out when there is a vacancy.
Mhm.
But if we just put the word out for all our commissions
I think
all
we
year
should just
round.
get in. Pardon? Well, my concern is that you're gonna end up with, you know, the PIOs do a great thing in it, and when there's not an opening,
Then you could sit a year.
well, the thing is that you might get a lot of people, because then it's a very low barrier. They don't even need to worry about it. It's like, yeah, at some point, maybe I'll interview.
Yeah, I think internally, the procedure would be that we would reach back out,
Yeah.
right, to confirm if we had a rolling basis set up. We would make sure that someone who had submitted something 8 months ago
Mhm.
wasn't just, okay, automatically, surprise.
But I'm just wondering if instead then of having
Right.
12 applicants for the cultural affairs committee things, that you're gonna be calling 60 people.
Yeah, makes sense.
And then 30 of them are gonna wanna do it.
And another thing just to add is we're in the process of implementing, right now it's, believe it or not, a paper-based application.
Yes.
Meaning we still require a wet signature on your application and, and so we are, and everything is managed in terms of terms and filing requirements off of a spreadsheet in the clerk's office. We're really excited to say that very soon we will have a new portal for
Okay.
commissioners to manage their filing requirements. So that when they sign in,
Yeah,
they're notified of their filing requirements. They're able to put their certificates in one place. They're able to apply electronically, see when the next vacancy is occurring, for example, all in one
Mhm.
place, which we're really excited about. So I think that that is also going to help us in terms of folks fully understanding when a vacancy is available, when the next expected vacancy is. And I think that that would be highlighted. Right now, you'd be required to go into the Madiac listing. It might not always be updated with current changes. In their portal, if they're interested in a commission, you're gonna be able to see clearly next vacancy, June 30th, 2024,
Mhm.
for example.
Mhm.
So I think that in general is gonna help us out as well with folks that are interested, but I see your point where you could, we do such a good job, you end up with 60 applications for one all year round. And it could even be 12 months before you even have an opportunity to appoint one of those seats.
Mhm.
So something for us to consider.
I would say I'm fine with doing the rolling
Mhm.
applications.
Yeah. I am too.
But, I do foresee,
Sure.
for better, or for worse, more applications.
What I'll say is I hope that ends up being the case for us anyway.
Yes,
Or
okay.
for the mobile home rent review board.
We can consider it and come back to you, maybe if we come up with any brainstorms as to how to temper that
Yeah.
particular issue.
You guys get back to us and we could discuss the options, I guess, but I think the only option is we have to interview. I mean, it just maybe very short interviews, like what we did with the last time. I think we only had 8 minutes, I think, a person.
Right.
Yeah.
But we'll have to have some sort of cutoff,
Yeah.
but prior to the.
But- But I think the changes that we made are going to make it a lot easier when we have an unscheduled vacancy and the water department says, no, we need to be filled immediately.
Okay, so on this list, I think we answered everything. The only thing was that we talked about conflict of interest and we talked about,
Well, I did bring, because I don't think, my understanding, and I'm not a lawyer, is that while we can require somebody to disclose that their spouse works, like Laura Schallenberger disclosing that her spouse works for the city.
Yeah.
Which she did, and, the issue what's interesting in that situation is that, she works or worked with her for Gina Dorrington's husband. But I don't know that that's something we can ask.
only the part that gets hard is that technically, I guess it comes down to, I'm sorry, but talking about marriage, because when you're married, you're basically one entity. So if somebody has a conflict, when a spouse has a conflict, that person has a conflict.
Right.
If they're not married and they're just living together, having kids, then that's where, I'm not a lawyer either, but I just know it gets very messy, but
Yeah, yeah. My understanding is we legally can ask if you have a relationship with somebody that works for the city, but nothing, we can't be asking about relationships that your spouse has.
Yeah, and I would just add that in general, we have to look at a state law around incompatible office.
Yeah.
And that's how we make a determination if whether or not there's a conflict with a commissioner being appointed. If there's an incompatible office. So for example, does having a spouse who works in the field present an incompatible office, meaning as your role as commissioner, will you be advocating for your own financial gain in front of that commission? And then do you present an incompatible office? So it comes down to a specific financial gain, which then makes it an incompatible office. So on an advisory committee, for example.
Yeah.
And I'll note too that my husband also applied for Parks and Recreation Commission prior and identified himself as such. But in that advisory capacity, for example, the evaluation has to be made is there a personal financial gain for me
Mhm.
in regards to my spouse serving in that role, which then creates an incompatible office? That's really the only jurisdiction we have is over whether or not there's a personal financial gain. And that's why we ask the question to identify if your spouse is a city employee, so that we can then take the steps to determine if there's an incompatible office.
Exactly.
But by virtue of being a spouse, which I would say is somewhat puts the spouse at a disadvantage because I may work for the city, but I'm also a resident of the city, and so is my husband, for example.
Yeah.
A resident taxpayer of the city who doesn't work for the city, but might not have an opportunity to participate in one of those commissions because of a perceived conflict
Mhm.
of having a spouse who works in the city. Now, I'm
Yeah.
not suggesting that's why he didn't get appointed, but but in general, I don't, I'm not certain that you could say a spouse presents itself immediately with the conflict of
Yeah.
interest.
Yeah, I think though that there is, and I take it seriously about any perceived conflict of interest, more serious than some people that blog think I do. Um, but with that said, is perception is oftentimes that's other people's reality. But as long as you're prepared to handle the fact and address and communicate that there is no conflict, that there's no financial gain or loss from somebody participating in whatever position they're going for, then you just need to be aware of that a perceived conflict of interest is that it is some people's reality.
Yeah. So
Okay. All right.
I
So,
don't think we can do more with that. Okay.
okay. I think that was, do we need to do anything more on that?
This was more like feedback, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
this is more like feedback. I can repeat it back to you though, if you'd like, just to make sure. This is 1, 2, 3, 5 things. So the first one was that we're always interviewing incumbents. I believe there was accepting if they're the only applicants.
I said that, but I think you said we want to hear.
Here's the thing. I would say we always interview them, but remember, interview can mean they do it on a.
Yeah. That's right. You got
We
it.
always
Okay.
interview incumbents. We talked about quarterly meetings, left up to staff's discretion as to how to schedule those out. And then all the meetings will be recorded and published, be published on the website. And everybody has the opportunity to either attend in person, virtually, or submit a recording. There's no preference.
Right.
And then finally, that ARC members can submit edits and new questions to staff to be reviewed, and that questions would be available to the applicants prior to the meeting. Was there a set, I didn't catch if there was a set time, 24 hours or something, but I mean, we can assume that no need to over.
No, we didn't. I just assume when you do the agenda for the, right?
Good.
Yeah, I think, you could do it with the agenda, yeah.
Do we have agenda?
Yeah. It could be part of the packet on the agenda.
That
We
was
do
one.
we do it as part of the recruitment. I don't think it matters.
Yeah, I know, that's true. Okay, good job.
Can I make a request?
Sure. I think, what is it?
I don't know, the opportunity to make closing comments.
I'm open to it.
Yes.
We're all here I like a casual meeting.
So I appreciate the open dialogue and I appreciate all of the feedback and the ARC committee driving some of these initiatives as a first step in resolving some of the reasons why I resigned from the water commission. I want to commend you for that. Thank you. And to the members of staff, Mr. Trebo, thank you for transparency and the information you've shared. I appreciate that. And the same to the city clerk's office, Mr. Reiser and Mr. McFarland. Thank you very much. So with that in mind, one request I have, revisiting the discussion of conflict of interest. So there's state law and there's an ethical consideration, and then there's a perception whether or not they're tied to state law or if it's political in nature.
Mhm.
But my request would be that you get an opinion from
FPPC or from,
or have the city attorney's office render an opinion or refer it out for an opinion. Because I still perceive that there's an ethical issue with the relationship that was just described as an example. And the issue is, quite frankly, you have the spouse of an employee, and that employee has a dotted line reporting to the general manager of the body which the spouse is serving. Public Works reports in some ways to the water department because of the internal service fund transfers. And so there's a transfer of money between the decisioning body and the recommendation body of the Water Commission.
Mhm.
And the nature of some of these expenditures as it's reported in the budget by the CFO of the city, specific to the internal service fund transfers and the recommendations of that body.
Mhm.
And so I perceive a potential ethical conflict there. And the structure of the way the city operates with the internal service fund transfers. So that's my feelings
Okay,
very directly about that.
so,
I would politically recommend that the